idam umu urtial oversight hearing ergid medibok utial te alagum te erar beklade da open urtial al hearing el alsil sing August 26 idang artial satellite office ra Alvira Clulaw al holdra oversight hearing lobangel la Bureau of Customs and Border Protection madirik lobangel Republic of Palau Postal Service management mar staff ra post office gidang artial hearing ilgirel issue ra tora drugs alngia ram lamal namoklol mondar alsela ablu segidi awabol المقترح oversight hearing di kutal bok welcome ra director ma postmaster material chiefs ma staff ra post office yak mas kami arawin masubil properly kom introduce ra kami members ra staff ra kami ngartial hearing di erado mol me vols egal di introduce ra members sa Senate ngartiang oting mga sulela presidenta Senate el direct el joint el oversight hearing kaya amle give ra instruction ek na sebol sa edel guk holder oversight hearing lobangel customs Miguel agencies government niya ukendela tora trucks mungulgiwa direction ngi ma instruction ngi ang mosep edel organizer tegi del hearing direk nga tanga vice chairman na committee senator ngi abang direk senator inawom direk lobangel senator Sangabaw senator Tabalwal senator Talams ma direk senator Cuarte tiga senator sel ang gagida direk member committee senator Basilius el direk national energy dito nga sulyar senators el mosep el energy de tal hearing sel almol me kadamo mestrat el arbekla adam mosep il gukko gera questioner tir maigel gora inquiry sel tir el gerel tal al isura adrax madi iklut el mention ngi director kama postmaster tal al hearing ergida while follow up persel le initial meeting ergi del Lumentary Arbekal agencies el goradim le close door el meeting el neswad al mukaw tingek nasing about the holder tial oversight ng ngumara teletele la approach my information el bodasiel ng madengel ngani el bebira information el ngania sensitivity ringil de kalungila da adang public da dosado el mocho pradai sa el gukora ongoing investigation mga cases mamukte kartial hearing ergi damal di mo ora mo ka tinge gi ma aigel agencies al nasing aigel dorul ma aigel gukora riorel se edel kaing se ngi kada misi itial lurere dara al gambat atora drax ma asegi di awal gora iwsel tial oversight hearing ergi ma aigel boda discuss el to aigel mal di momsa process Miguel procedure at ora urior el mosbe el mastrira at el senator sa matamo understand ra flora urior Miguel mongot mok urior el niya wabalo la sablaka blue belaura ay gagi del kuk illegal contraband del mesois ba al sa blue belaw Miguel kuk roller kami protect ra border ma ay gagi del kuk ora prohibited el wadrax Miguel illicit items el de calgirel mesoy sur bela malibeng el sis bela girel mo niya proper clearance ngi ay gigi da so dal mo ka dingek nasing marada they handle el altan adol mol me di recognize ra vice presidenta senate de member ra committee atak el mayor el niya direct national energy so after segi del mekot el meeting ergi del Lumentary Arbekal agencies including MOJ ma officer AG Ingoramlo blakatak na sebol sel mamol format igal oversight ring ring de boda settle wa kat maklin wal ko mo tool face sel gotbal guk tibol gamul al guk agencies el ngara a border control gamul tirgel wam ngaram dala tuang el preventa atto kora commercial preventa asisbelela drugs el met mura birbelo sel guk aigel guk pebre agency sel guk handle sel guk plal ngoy a drugs el mura birbelo tirgegi del guk handle al sel a blue sel blal sis drugs mal bol ngania kora distribution ma a prosecution tirgel el distributa drugs sa lulbelaw bol guk separate oversight el loban tril ng walga tul ga karusel iga ibando kada ako lergida di gambat tial tora drugs mang diakal salmal mo klo o sisulta men sa edel guk ngosang asi men diakal al salmal klo mo impact ngil mo ra society rigid ma heldra blurbelaw Seguida agora approach el gida o mesengi ma elal sales tel oversight ri del maldimo focus ay gida del tora entry ma border control e wal sa edel mo kaunit na sing regel guk kakarusel role post office ma role customs ma immigration ma quarantine de boto kaunit na sing regel alwal sa edel milisi mo os bisi itel border gel mo gerete elela tora draxel met et muna blurbelaw so lagi da maldi rogul madet na setial el tora drax adia al bes el toy tiang gumrak na se it's an ongoing war bekel blue abdul ada da borngin direct el dingani o ay sura tora drax alang ay nga baby regel de dulaseng illegal type industry el direct mal al cloud do remurta al sel mang attract trar tokal citizens ra carousel blue al mo so is bangi even though illegal andi ito tokar adal direct al soril al take advantage sa way gidal activities el just to make money mang tial lurere del tral gambata tora draksa diakal I believe in diakal ending ani malmol mandi as much as possible in suadal misabal wad makabalment tergid al misisi mandi kada sal mal mo o face agel major consequences ra tora drugs al mesois be ermultra al selabal ba mandi kung more say de director ka ma postmaster yak mo o idea algyong lego mal guk bol sa dim kora di introducer at the mew ang amamura customs director amamura ka kora sigida at sendar gid lang madat di sa pele to kora di follow presentation gid may guk information al bom share bol sa el gora di follow sa gid gid at senda bol kora kaidra discussion gid understand ng ari sel gora presentation gal podo mesengi mal sa pele direct selbom drusel presentation el se di highlight ay gora important el aspect raurior el lungila omsier el mora senators bol sabihin mo understand the aureriu may gel nga real mandate kami madirect el kita madingin nga isel customs act el direct el pending na madalang kongres al direct el CPL ebom kora touch a little bit on the Customs Act ay gel especially gel provision ngil mumarang na sensel direct al mos misi aureriu tay gel el particular area ra ako kambat atora drug smuggling may gel kupebi ra contraband sel ida dakal salso al di open rabluad mang mesoism mang ayegi bol sab el gora mo kaidra meeting rigid matial al discussion rigid al afternoon and thereafter kukpol mereka customs ma immigration ma ay gang direct al sedel guk moniat sa tel la postmaster mal kukpol so dia igel kukurere la post office kita mendenga post office dia ka amarrol ngira guk kambat atora drak sending ngani igel part ra process til mo collaborate lo bangela away customs ma immigration may gil gukosi sa belela ro packages ma mails el medrura post office mga ni segi del walgora link ra a post office maurere a post office gire la gide al toruro gida al bangal gire la a clearance ra ar other ma packages ma klalo me sois bablu belo man dikul mo segi de director ek awrak paskaula le diklutel recognize ra tangkal sungino senator sungino direkal nacho energy nga direkal tara senator el open gather tel hearing. With that, I yield the floor to you, Director Ma, Gukum Leader Gide Selguk Area Customs.
Test. Sorry, but I have to speak English. My apologies. Thank you, Chair, for and Senate JGA for inviting us to this hearing. With me today, I have Bolton, who's in charge, the acting chief for immigration. Next to me on my left, I have the chief of biosecurity, Divan. I think we all know each other. Do you want to rest or just, and then? Okay, they'll introduce themselves later. As you know, since the restructuring of our bureau, we have immigration and biosecurity, and we all work together to ensure that we do our due diligence, we protect the borders and secure, make sure we can manage and secure the borders against illicit drugs, people who are coming in and not following the law. And so in order to understand our roles and our ongoing efforts in relation to drugs, I think if it's okay, I'll provide this presentation to you. I'll try and skip through the other stuff, but and so we can just focus on the drugs. I'm not sure if you can all see that. So,
Yeah. Before you proceed with this, may the psate alla postmaster madil guktil introduce adam do para record to ng wata atyan.
Manuel hitasil se Senator Aldabel ma roguil adalti al gamitira JGA omsuala rate al gukmasanga a post office gid mata gigukme o aisa igelnya urere post office Togunisel niya kukmo imomamal direklol nga seora tele-tele la sabakle la bulwad mang modia al salmoklo malubang sa edel gogringi torbingia sisbelle la maknit el gar malubang maknit klalo mer al sela bulwad elalo bangger el alsil sa angaria asure bells angaria sel org chart el black pescabim Semerura last administration 2015 dimla kada akat maklil mo elang mla kadamla hire operations manager ngang permanent employee ra post office man sabel ngarsegi dagi roguil isel teluro rawal adil longot mokla so lang ingel niya direkal ngara sila management postmaster. Elang ingel postmaster Daniel Aguon. Gaygi di ako talgamang targil raurora post office namo o okday ragal raurora post office limle ngar high school aurora molto high school mo raurora post office el mahal madingero aurora post office nga agi mo speringi agel niya ko makail tele la post office adi makita mo diri asing mo retire el mel December yang arbitar niya ang agi dele postal inspector Sherry Seizure igero guil tele la aurora post office lol tirak la ula USPS Maigel niya adiregal tirak lal ula blur belaw raigel niya makle la blur belaw adiregal nga al sela post office o mesel wasya atletele la me la dia kalbol tamal al ula blur belau mal ubang ula USPS. Akti mo kora tribals mo da ka sira tial ongetul ongetul olbil eso lang mlongaria BS el gukdro al muluktub el la post office nge postmaster general nge memlara ngir gmiu ar adrasenet ngaka ngel megot el mo postmaster general sira 2014 a Timothy Sinsak ngel alnya tangakal delegate rablurangar along yang ngaka mo makungerung el postmaster general etrigel ulagu era former postmaster general Sinsak adim le postmaster sengaria ulam komlilin mo ay le selbora meeting lo bangela igal postra blulaad madre gal blura merigelen ngwal bolas ilma tingela postmaster lende gal ngradru lela mega decision el gerela a postal service ra ablur bela se malmlewi lureri ul komikit maklim elang namo sebela a postra gidra blur bela ul mora postra blura merigel madre gal blura blulaad ay gida pas kami komam sulang.
Thank you, Chair. So if I may, I guess I'll give you an overview of what we do within our Bureau, and I think most of you are familiar with that already. Oh man, okay, the purpose, I guess, within our Bureau, our objective is to make sure that we protect our borders, collect revenue, and make sure we facilitate travel and trade. That's one of our main goals. And it's important that when we do this, we're able to manage and enforce the entry and exit point requirements at the borders. Our aim is to prevent and detect, in respect to law enforcement, to prevent and illicit drugs, goods, and other criminal activities from taking place, whether it has to do with immigration, biosecurity, or customs. I guess you're familiar with what we do. Our mission is, to protect our borders. Our vision is to, this was a part of our five-year plan back in 2022 to provide excellent, efficient, and effective services. Basically, our values are to own it, act with integrity, demonstrate respect of others, be professional. Our main focus areas, we only have 4 within our Bureau. One is to enforce border protection and security, and that's in relation to law enforcement, improve revenue collection and compliance, promote trade and travel, and of course to implement organizational reform and modernization practices within our Bureau. We have 5 divisions, and to include corporate services, we have about 40-some officers, 26 immigration, and 10 biosecurity officers. We have been focused on hiring additional people due to a number of vacancies, so that's a part of our plan to reorganize and reclassify our Bureau. So we developed our strategy back in 2022 within those 4 focus areas. Law enforcement being the first, we had about 7 priority areas. One of them was to strengthen collaboration between border agencies, law enforcement, relevant agencies, and our stakeholders. So that's been one of the first things we've been focused on. The second one was to manage and prevent risk from reaching our borders. The third one, maintain a high presence across all ports and build on existing port security arrangements. Next, our other focus area was to detect, interdict, and disrupt illegal border activities, strengthen intelligence and enhance risk management, compliance, and control processes. In doing so, it's important that we adopt technology advancements aimed at operation improvements. Build and modernize UCIB facilities and infrastructure at the port or current sites. So that's what we have for law enforcement. In a nutshell, if you look at law enforcement, these are the activities that you want to do. If it's not clear up here, I believe you have your handouts. So in order to strengthen collaboration, one of the first things we did under executive order was to establish the Coordinated Border Management Working Group. That was one thing that was identified under our Integrated Border Management project that we had under UNDP. And especially due to COVID, there were a number of agencies that were involved, including health and labor. And so with that executive order that created that working group, we were able to meet once a month. We needed to also strengthen partnership with other agencies, international organizations, to get their support, and also government. In order to strengthen collaboration, it was important for us to exchange intelligence and information, especially on a real-time basis. When we talk about risk management, we need to have up-to-date laws, policies, and SOPs in place. Without those, it would be hard to, for our people to understand their roles and responsibilities, and for us to manage our respective areas. Advanced reporting and targeting. That's an important thing that we need to do for our bureau. We need to have ensure that we have advanced information, like the QR code that comes in, and the manifest and other information that will help us determine and plan our activities. We need to invest in technology, and of course, capacity building or employee training. We need to develop a risk management framework in place, and those are the things that are important. In order to maintain a high presence, we need to collaborate with other agencies in order to harmonize security practices. Make sure those internal controls are in place. We need to maximize our resources through cross-training. When we talk about detecting and interdicting drugs, and for example, at the border, we need to have an operational framework in place. And that's one of the problems that I see today, is not having an operational framework in place. A security plan through the use of technology is important. We need to adopt technological advances. And one of the things, of course, that we'll be doing this year is the non-intrusive inspection facility, where we can use X-ray machines, the K9 dogs, and other things to help us. And of course, one of the main things is to strengthen intelligence, risk management, and compliance. Establish intel. We do that by establishing intel investigation teams. One of the recommendations for Palau under the Integrated Border Management project from the UNDP was to establish a joint risk assessment center. They've developed that in Fiji, in Vanuatu, and other places. So that's one thing we need to do. Analyze and target risk. So those are with respect to enhancing border protection, those are the focus areas. We have revenue collection, trade facilitation. As you know, we are WCO members now, and we need to instill the frameworks and adopt those things, conduct workshops, and develop modern practices. So those are the things. Within our structure, we need to also reclassify our positions and look at what we need to do and develop our structure. So there's a lot of things here that we need to do, but when you talk about good governance, you need to make sure you have clear strategy, policies, and procedures, and do that through a holistic approach. So anyway, these are just a few of the things that I wanted to mention. So when you talk about drugs, you have to ask, where do we get our authority to search, inspect, arrest, and seize? Well, first of all, it's in the Constitution. Constitution says border searches are universal norm. That's the practice for everybody. Palau has the right to protect its borders. And that is one of the things that When we asked the AG for a legal opinion, that's one of the first things that came out. Palau has a right to protect its borders from preventing illegal goods from coming in, the migration of people who may do harm or things like that, so, and biosecurity. So those are the things that I've addressed, that I'm addressing today as well. And that's why at the border we don't search. We don't need a warrant to search. And we'll get into that later. We have other laws here, 32 PNC and 162 and 40 PNC. All these laws complement each other in allowing us to search the borders without a warrant. And those are the things that were mentioned in the AG's opinion. We have Executive Order 450 that reestablished our bureau, so we have immigration biosecurity in there. We have old regulations, 2006, that also talks about us being allowing to search and arrest and detain people. And we have the Cash Disclosure Act, Smuggling Act. For immigration, there's Title 13 of the immigration law. Immigration regulations of 2006, Executive Order 424 that gave immigration the authority to also protect our borders, to also inspect, search, and arrest and detain. Then there's, of course, when we got reorganized, RPPL 11-7, Executive Order 450. Biosecurity has their act. They also have regulations, Executive Order 450, and other laws that complement what we do, includes Executive Order 475. So all these laws put together, this is where we get our authority to do what we do. Our focus over the years, even today, has been on the administrative arrangements, our governance arrangements, information management and arrangements. Right now we have the Asukura system, we have the border management system for immigration, the biometrics. We're looking at developing the single windows. As of right now, the expert's here, he's back, and this is the next phase of that project that we're doing. We'll look at putting in a biosecurity system. The QR code, that's been in effect since this year. Where our bureau, we are members of the World Customs Organization. We are members, Palau is a member of Interpol. We do get information, intel from RILO. We do get support for our programs from the OCO, PIDC, which is immigration. IATA, we're working with them now to work on the advanced passenger information and other advanced information that's needed. So those are a few things that we're doing. Whenever you implement a program or when you look at the way we're structured, it's important to ensure that we have the right policies in place, the right processes through the SOPs, and that's important because it's important that we, in order to implement, to enforce compliance and enforcement, we have these measures in place. Risk management, we need to be able to determine what aircrafts are at risk, what people, what goods are coming in. We need to make sure that, one, our people are trained and we continue to develop them. Everybody should understand their roles and responsibilities. Information, communication, and technology, we need to use that to help us in terms of information sharing. We need to analyze these reports. Infrastructure and facility, assessment and planning is important because it helps. We need to strategize and plan things. Infrastructure is important. If you come to the arrivals area at the airport, you notice too small. It's hard for us to implement certain things in there, but it's workable. We need to collaborate and coordinate with the other agencies, and that's why the CBM working group is important. It's the basis for us to communicate and collaborate, training and capacity building, and then of course there's governance framework that needs to be in place to identify our roles and responsibilities. Okay, so the one thing I want to share with you is when people come in, what do you notice? You'll notice immigration in the front. When the aircraft comes, people they disembark, they come over to immigration. They need to turn in they submit their travel documents. Immigration can clear a family of 2, 3 if they're all together. Once that's done, they go to the baggage claim. They get their baggages. They proceed to customs and biosecurity, and then they exit the airport. So in a nutshell, that's just a short general view on how that happens. Immigration. This flow chart for immigration. Once people arrive, the process involves people going to immigration to check in, and before coming to Palau, one of the things they should have done is the QR code. If it's done 72 hours before, or 48 hours or 24, customs, immigration, and biosecurity, we can see who's coming in, and then we can flag people if they're a risk or a target. We also compare that to the passenger manifest 2 hours prior to the flight. What kind of intelligence reports do we get? Open source, other information from the agencies, NEU, to help us focus on our efforts at the airport. The next thing is when people come in, of course, they'll wait in line. They'll present their travel documents, and of course, they'll have to answer questions on behalf of answer questions to immigration. When immigration asks you questions, your response should be truthful. It's like you're under oath. You need to tell the truth, but we don't get that all the time. Once we ask questions, then what do we ask? We'll ask you questions about your travel, your stay, your occupation. Do you have a round trip ticket? Have you been convicted of any other crimes? We'll scan your travel documents. We'll record and check your passport and visa data. We'll see if your passport is authentic, and of course, we'll do the biometrics. We'll take the photo. We also issue visas and permits for tourist businesses, and if you have a provisional visa, we'll allow you into the country. The immigration also issues PPF refunds. And if you pass that inspection, then you can you actually go through the next phase, which is customs. If you don't, you might go through secondary questioning. You could be denied entry in case you violate any immigration laws or requirements. Secondary, we do have an office in the back, and people are often questioned or set aside if there are any issues with them. The problem with this at this stage within our current process is we don't have the advanced passenger information, and the PNI, the Passenger National Identification Records. We don't have access from IATA or the airlines. We can't determine somebody who's coming in that might be a target or a risk. We don't know whether a person bought his ticket in advance or if they have a round trip ticket, because and that limits our ability to do our job. Now, we are members of Interpol, but there's no functioning Interpol connectivity yet to immigration. So that's and I'm sure that'll happen. And of course, we have a new immigration system, but it's only tracking movements at that time. It's not linked to our visa and permit processing. I believe that will be the next phase. But right now, we need to make sure that all of these things come together in order. So when we process visas and permits at this stage, we're still using the old system. And I think, if I'm correct, maybe by next month, they should be working on the second phase. But all these things need to come together so that we can stop doing things manually and start having the system do more of an assessment of the passengers and things like that. Okay, so that's the immigration process when you come in. And of course, when you come in, then you go to the baggage claim, you pick up your bags, and if you've done the QR code already, then you can go to customs and the customs line. If you haven't, then you need to go back and enter that on your phone, or there are 2 computers there. The person can do that, and we do have somebody there who can help. If you have nothing to declare, you still go through a spot check or preliminary inspection, and then you're released if there's nothing to declare. When I say declared, it could be food, it could be dutiable items, etc. But if you declare, if you find that, yes, I do have things that are taxable, then we'll do a more thorough inspection. And if we find that if there are things that are prohibited, of course, we'll confiscate that. We'll give you a confiscated form, and it depends. If you don't have a permit for food, by security, we'll also confiscate those items, and then of course it goes off to the bin or where they destroy it. So this is the flow chart. Now during inspections, if you are selected to go to secondary, then you go to secondary. If you pass secondary, then you get released. If not, then if you had any contraband or anything like that, we'll seize that. And if it's drugs, of course, we transfer that. The evidence gets transferred to public safety. So that's the process. So what happens when you go through immigration, and what are some enforcement actions that you'll see? Immigration can deny entry. We can revoke your visa. The supervisor working should, the officer should check with the supervisor, get approval. The agent is notified. Your return on the current or next available flight. A case report is submitted to the director. So that's what happens. Investigation process. Also, immigration officers can investigate. They'll provide an incident report. Director will sanction the investigation, especially if there's more to be done in relation to working a case. And then once we're done with the investigation, we submit that to the AG with the transmittal. For customs, we have our primary inspection lines. What do we do when people come? We profile. We ask questions. We do document checks. Well, in this case, we'll look at your QR code. We do random inspections. K9 unit is at the airport. We don't have any x-rays there yet, but I had a meeting with Japan. We'll be expecting them in 2025. Now, if you get selected to go to secondary inspections, that means you'll have to answer further questions. And if we ask you questions, if the officer has reasonable suspicion, this could lead to a pat-down or even a strip search. Now, when we talk about internal body cavities, okay, if we feel that somebody is carrying something inside or concealing drugs, that person should remain at customs until they either discharge it, or if not, in terms of safety, we can transfer them down to the hospital, and we get them to the hospital to conduct the examination. Now, once the drugs are confirmed, if the passenger has that, then the person is arrested. Do we need a warrant? Maybe, maybe not. If it's still under our custody, then we don't need, because the person was caught at the border, we took him down to the hospital, and then if they do discharge it, we can take him back and process the person. But in most of the cases we've been able to get a warrant and then transfer that person to the police office, to the NEU. And then other times without a warrant, we've had consent. So the person admitted, so those are just some cases. By security officers, they seize items, especially if it's related to agriculture, and they'll do their incident report, investigation, and then we can file it with the AG or they can find the person. So again, if we talk about immigration, what are some of the authorities? Can immigration authorities arrest and detain? Yes. They can do that without a warrant, especially during routine inspections. They can arrest routine questioning and investigations. They can do that without a warrant as well. If there's an alien that's here illegally or overstayed, we can also conduct investigations because the person has no status. It's an overstay. Overstay is a felony. We can ask questions. If we need to detain them, then we can detain them as well. The only problem is we don't have a detention center, so if we have to put them somewhere, we either put them in the jail or we release them to a third party, provided that there's an agreement. So for customs, like I mentioned, at the border during routine inspections, the law says we don't need to have, we can conduct warrantless searches because at the borders we're looking for contraband and we want to prevent those things from coming in. Searches beyond the border or its functional equivalent, if somebody comes in and then they carry drugs and we didn't find on them and then we wanted to go after them, we can do that as well. But that requires a heightened level of suspicion, especially if the person was still at the airport, outside the airport, they got in the car, started driving, and we stopped them. If none of those characteristics have changed and the person is still there, then those are the things we've been discussing with the Attorney General's office. Those are the things we've seen in case laws where we do have the rights. We had 2 case laws in Palau, previous ones, where the judge ruled in favor of customs doing outside searches, extended border searches. So there are conditions that come with that. And some of the conditions that need to be met, especially if we're going to go outside of the borders, but let's say we have functional equivalents like the post office, the Palau shipping, other places where we have warehouses. We can do that without warrants. But in other places, especially, the law also says in the U.S., you should have at least reasonable certainty that the crossing occurred, and then there, reasonable suspicion comes into play as well, especially if you believe that a criminal activity is about to happen, or if this person being searched come in illegally. The same thing applies with vessels. We believe that if a vessel is out there and it's out there, customs can go out there and determine whether or not, based on reasonable suspicion, to board the vessel, especially if it's in a place where no other vessels are at and you're known to have drug routes. There are some conditions that may apply. But those are all things that we can do. So now, I can just talk about the international mail process. So when the international mail comes in, United Airlines is the one that handles all the mail. And this is our process currently. The ground handlers, United Airlines, will handle the mail. They'll bring that, they'll actually scan the mail. It goes into United cargo area. There is, the mail is tagged, and then it goes into a storage area. The next day, the post office comes. They have the key. They'll pick it up and pick up the mail, and they'll transport the mail to the Palau post office. Before the mail goes inside, our officers will inspect the mail, and this is done in the back of the post office. We will run the canine dogs, and once it goes inside, the Palau Post Office will sort and process the mail. Now, in the event that, and once they process the mails, when they release it, the passenger will come, pick up their package, but they won't receive it. Package will be transferred to the customs front office. Why? Because we look for dutiable items. We can then look at the consignee, open packages again, and if there are any drugs or anything, then we can confiscate that and detain that, call NEU, they'll come in, and then we can either do a joint investigation or we can determine how that goes. But in simplicity, that's how it works. All the drugs that we've seized have been transferred to NEU. That's in the law, and that's what we've been following since. One of the concerns that I have is that all mail that comes in, we have mail that comes to the airport and the port. Our bureau is the first line of defense, whether it's customs, immigration, biosecurity. Now, the imports of methamphetamine and opioids or fentanyl and other synthetic drugs, it's a big concern now. You see it in the U.S., you see it in Guam, Fiji, and I'm hoping that we don't get it here, but those are other concerns that we have, especially with respect to the laws. We have laws that specifically focus on synthetic drugs, so that's one of the questions. Are our laws out of date? We have an outdated interagency policy since 2008 where all of these agencies agreed to share intel and information. That's something that needs to be relooked at. And of course, our bureau, we partner with and coordinate with a lot of the other agencies. The CBM working group is our link to addressing many issues at the borders in order to streamline the processes and make sure we manage the borders effectively. And whenever there are complaints, we address that as well together. Oh man, what's that? Late last year, we did a public notice. We put that out at the post office. And basically, we said that all the international mail that comes in, it's subject to inspection. So if your mail is inspected in the back, and the person comes and right now they can pick it up in the front, but in the back, when we do the K9 and other inspections, if we find a package, we'll open the mail, we'll put this note of inspection. It's a small form that we have. If there's nothing found, we'll put it back in and we'll tape it. Much like what you see with TSA, it's the same process. People are notified. If we do confiscate that and detain it because we need to transfer it to NEU, then of course we'll do the chain of custody and then transfer that to public safety for the evidence. And so I guess I'm almost towards the end of this, but custom seizures, right now, when we detain goods, we need to make sure we identify and what we've seized and document the description of items and other, and we do the incident report statements and things like those. We'll notify NEU, and if NEU will come in and of course we'll transfer that. Where do we store the drugs? Right now at the post office. Right now, if the drugs are, we'll hold it there until the officer from NEU comes. We'll discuss the arrangements and what needs to be done. We'll do the transfer. They'll weigh it. We'll take photos, evidence. Handling all that needs to be important. And then we'll take that and investigate. Sometimes we'll work with the NEU if it's a joint investigation. But some of the problems that we have is sometimes when we do transfer cases, we don't hear anything about it. So I think those are one of the things we need to look into. And of course, if they do finish the investigation, they process that to the AG, and then they'll decide what happens with that case. Whether the items get seized or disposed of, or things that I think we need to improve on, whether it's at the airport or the post office, is the physical process and security controls. We always need to test the system, test the process and make sure we have, the secure areas, especially when we're processing the mail. I know one of the gaps that we had identified was, well, what happens if customs is not there? What happens, the Postmaster General addressed this many times, the process when the mail is picked up and goes to courier. What happens, do we trust the employees so that nothing happens? So those are things that we need to address in this process. Control access, who has control to the mailroom, who has control to the all these areas at the airport. Do we have the screening equipment, X-ray and scanning devices? Do we have SOPs and guidelines in place? Those are the areas. Are we able to build capacity to train our people and give them the support that they need in order to enforce the laws? Communication needs to be clear when we talk with other agencies and identify what our roles are and things like that. Intelligence and incident reporting, those things need to be done and needs to be done right. We need to make sure that our officers are able to be trained properly in order to handle these cases, to ensure that the evidence is handled right and those things. So those are things we always talk about. The second area of concern of improvement is the advanced cargo manifest. Our responsibility is to target and prevent imports from coming in. But if we don't get the manifest, we won't know what's coming in. And that's why when we implemented the Asakura system, we ensured that shippers provide us with the manifest. The only thing we're not getting at the post office is the manifest. Well, we do get the manifest, but it's only weight. And the other Saipan, Guam, American Samoa, FSM, Marshals, they only get the weight. What we want to do and what we require the post office to provide us is the cargo manifest, the description of the items that are coming in. So we've been in discussion early this year with the USPS. They didn't like it at first, but eventually they got to understand why we were asking, because in order for us to work smart and not hard, in order for us to ensure that we focus on certain packages and not everything, we need to see who is bringing in those packages of mail. So what needs to be done, we've identified the process and what needs to be done. The U.S. will have to provide the ITMAT format for the Palau Post Office, because they don't have a system. They don't have the means to do that. And then once they develop that format, then Customs will implement what's called the AC Hub system that can be linked or receive the data. They can upload it to that, and then we can get it into our system. So we can target and do all that, but the cost for the U.S. is about $1 million. And for UNCTAD to develop the AC Hub for us, that's about $200,000. So we've had discussions with the minister, but that needs to happen, because right now we're getting no information on the advanced cargo manifest. And much like the advanced passenger information system for the passengers coming in and the PNR, we need to get that, because this is how everybody, immigration customs around the world, US, Australia, this is how they do business. And without that, we're blind. So other areas of improvement includes reorganizing our structure, reclassifying our positions so that he's not just immigration, he's not just biosecurity, but we're border enforcement officers. We can streamline we can align our positions and so that if you're going to work the airport, you're working passenger processing, you don't need this many agencies. We can cross-train our agencies, and that's what a lot of these other Homeland Security did. They've been able to strengthen their investigation and intel, and they work together with the DEA on things like this. But those are the kind of things that we need to do. And right now, we've been working with personnel to reclassify the positions, but it's not easy. That'll probably take an executive order, but we've started the process already, and the HR department will help us. Other key areas of improvement, we need to have current laws and policies. The Customs Act, Chairman, the Customs Act, that needs to be passed, because if we don't have the laws in place, how can we implement and process cargo and focus on these other processes that we have? We also need to look at the immigration law as well. You know, so immigration right now, I got a complaint saying, hey, why aren't you guys doing anything to resolve these people coming in and doing things? And I said, well, there's a loophole in the law. Anybody can come to Palau. Palau is open. So Palau needs to come up with an immigration policy. If you want to require people to obtain a visa, come up with a program. Do the online visa. Let them apply online. And if we need workers, come up with a process that will be beneficial to them. So when they come in, they're coming in to work. Because the tourists that we get nowadays, they're not legitimate tourists. And to come in that tourist visa, you need to be legitimate. And if we find them working without a labor permit or they're here as a tourist, then immigration can revoke their visa. But we need workers, and we see the importance of that, so we need to come up with schemes. And if our problem, now we have immigration, we have people who came here, lied to immigration, and they came to seek asylum. Where do we put them? They claim they have no money. So we deported some, but we have about 4 people here at the moment. And Palau is not a signatory to the Human Rights UN, and my understanding is they might be here for as long as 1 year. So where do we put them? Guam and Sinamai, they have detention centers. And if we do put them in there, that's a cost to us. That's a burden. So we've discussed this with the IOM, and later this month we'll be meeting with the Ministry of State, IOM, and the AG to determine how do we fix this. And are they really asylum seekers? You know, so those are the concerns we have. How do we strengthen collaboration between the agencies? The CBM working group, the executive order ends in September. We should be able to do an annual report to the president and provide the strategy as well that was developed by the UNDP. So that's going to happen. You know, there are a lot of positive things that happened with the CBM working group. Not only did we meet, but we were active. We actually had funding from UNDP to help us with some of the needs at the airport, those TVs, and to do announcements. Peter got some funding for that, and we had other equipment that was brought. They helped to even pay for the license for Asakura. So those are, and then we're looking at other arrangements between the end of this year and next year to continue under the same program. We're going to get CCTV cameras for the airport and the other ports. We're helping the post office as well. We've asked for other requests in terms of equipment that will help us, computers, to help with our border agencies. So those are some of the things that we've been focused on. Again, we need to be intelligence-driven and develop our investigation capabilities to address the threats. Without the API, Advanced Passenger Information, and the PNR, the Passenger National Record Database, we won't know who's arriving, coming in. The manifest, by the time we get the manifest, China Airlines right now, we get that ahead of time, but it's not in the format that we want. IATA has complained that United Airlines cannot give us the manifest electronically because we need a secured system. So those are the things we need to, and we need the law. We need the law to actually say that the airlines need to give immigration, customs, or the law enforcement agencies that information. So that's why I asked that in the Customs Act, if you do review it and if you do pass it, put the API and PNR data in there, because right now we're working blind. Those are the things we need. The visa processing system that we're doing now, it's manually. If you don't understand what the rules and requirements are for somebody to come in, go to our website, bcbp.pw. We have all information. One of the things we did in January when we did the Asakuta project was we created a website so everybody can go there and look for information. If it's not on there, let me know. But we have legislation, we have all that other information. And this is what I was talking about. Not all of us know what opioids mean and what are the types of opioids that are out there. I mean, we know heroin, we know codeine, we know, but right now, the big concern now in the U.S. and around the world is there are synthetic drugs that are imitations. There are these drugs that are being smuggled in, and it's big business. If you look at, and this is around the world, we've had 70,000 people who have died from overdoses. Now, I'm not a health expert, but when I look at these figures, and it's alarming. And I talked to the director of Guam Customs and Quarantine, and he said, hey, we had 4 deaths. We're still trying to figure out what happened. So I'm not sure how they're handling this. You go to Fiji, I guess you'll see a number of zombies walking around. They're all high on fentanyl. So those are just some of the concerns. We've got to protect our people when inspecting. We tell them to wear masks and gloves. Those are some of the things. This, I think, is the last thing that I have. But when I look around the table, and I have to ask, because I think next week we'll have MOJ coming in, but who's responsible for what? This is something that I saw, and I did this myself, but maybe you guys have seen this around, but if we're talking about sorting the mail, who's responsible for sorting the mail? Is it Customs, NEU, Post Office, AG? So this exercise here allows us to determine only one person or one agency who's responsible for completing this action. Who's accountable? Who should be consulted? You can have 2 people in here who's consulted and who's informed. So if we're trying to figure out who's responsible for gathering intelligence, who's responsible for sorting and processing the mail, that responsibility is with the Post Office alone. But who should be consulted? Maybe NEU, maybe Customs, and AG just needs to be informed. If you're going to gather intel in the investigation, I put down all of us. Now, the laws that we have says NEU is responsible for interdicting investigations and for arresting and all that. But if you look at the U.S., and you have ICE, Immigration and Customs Authority. You have DEA. Right now, there was a directive that said, all of you guys, if you guys are in investigation and you're getting intel on both agencies, you need to work together. You need to share that, because nobody's sharing intel. I don't know much about what's going on in NEU, but we do have an officer there that is tasked, who's been there for years, but we've got to improve on that intelligence. The problem I have is many years ago we had Executive Order 190 that was created to also help Customs, and that created the Drug Task Force. Customs was a big part of that task force. We were responsible for working with NEU, with the Drug Task Force from police. We were sharing intel. We got intel. We worked the investigation. We knew what was happening. Then, when the Ministry of Justice was reorganized, and they created the NEU with the director, then that was abolished. That executive order was repealed. What happened to Customs? It was nice that MOJ had reorganized, but what happened to Customs, Border Protection? we got chopped. We were left out of the loop, and you can't have that. What happened after that reorganization? Then we had the more recent one, MOJ, creating the Transnational Crime Unit, which is good. You still have the NEU, and they're focused on human trafficking also, and maybe alcohol, tobacco falls under them. So the vapes, when we seize vapes now, they handle that. So it's clear. But the problem now is we've been looking at the drug problem as being maybe, is it, one agency, or should we look at both agencies having some shared responsibility? So I wanted to do this so we can determine who takes the lead, because a lot of the seizures that we've had, if the officers at the airport, they're there to observe. Police comes and they observe. The operations, it's let's say customs operation, immigration. We work it from the moment that plane lands. We make sure the control processes are in place. We find somebody, take him to secondary. We'll ask the questions. Of course, we don't need probable cause at that time, but if we do ask questions and the person confesses and says, yes, I found this drug, we can work the case. It's not a problem. With all that intel and everything, we can prepare the reports, we prepare cases, because we do that for every other case that is not drug related. One of the recommendations I have is, one, we should look at the holistic approach of how we work and improve on that. Because it's easy for us to just say, and this is what we're used to, okay, we found the drugs. I mean, if the person pulls out the drugs, that's your probable cause. That's your probable cause to arrest. We can do that too, it's not a problem. But we're so used to just transferring the evidence to them, handing the case over to them, and then we hear nothing. So those are the things that we need to improve on. And when searching, detecting, seizing, smuggled narcotics, and arresting, who has that responsibility? Of course, NEU can take the lead. Does Customs still have a shared responsibility? There are some times when we work joint investigations, especially if it's a controlled delivery. There are some times when we don't. Why? So that's the problem at the larger scale with DEA and ICE. So they made a directive, I'm not sure when, but it mandated that both of them, combine, share intel. One of the things the Unity project under this integration border plan that we had, CBM recommendation, sorry, so many terms, but they recommended that we have established a joint risk assessment center. Customs, immigration, maybe other agencies involved, marine law maybe, but you're going to work on developing your intel, gathering intel, and determining how to protect your borders. We already see that at marine law, how they see all these vessels, but are they focused on yachts and small crafts coming in? No, they're focused on fisheries. So these are the things that the kind of synergy that we need to bring together. So those are the kind of things when we transfer the evidence to the NEU, it's their responsibility, not ours anymore. We just need to be informed what's going on. But with respect to the case, what happens? So we need to be actively involved in those things, and this is just the last thing. So we want to develop an SOP, establish standards, operating, make sure we have operating, we can operate, and then your procedures. But the SOP will help us guide our employees, follow procedure, and have uniformity. So whether we do that through an MOU or not, those are the issues. If I can just try and answer those questions, then maybe, or just raise some concerns and recommendations, and maybe this is the only thing left for me to say, and I won't speak anymore. If we right now one of the issues we have for immigration is if we detain somebody, how long can we detain them? Can we detain them for 24 hours? If they're in overstay, can we detain them until they depart? That's one question that I've asked the AG. And she goes, oh yeah, you can detain them. And then we go, hey, wait a minute, we got this 24-hour rule. So those are things we need to, work on. We need better coordination and accountability among our agencies. I think drugs seized by by BCBP, our officers between the ports of entry or at the port should be referred to NOU, but we should be working the cases. You know, we need to determine who takes the lead, but nobody should be left out. We need to standardize the process. We need to develop our intel information, and for the last 3 weeks, that's what we've been doing. As of today, I have 5 immigration officers who actually moved, and because of what we were doing last week, to focus on investigations. I have 2 people, 1 intel from Customs, 1 intel from officer from Immigration Customs, who are sitting, and all they do now is look at intel, look at the manifest, they look at the QR code, they're putting everything together. So, this, if we're going to fight the war on drugs, I think it's important to have this interagency coordination mechanism in place. The Joint Risk Assessment Center is something much like the Fusion Center in the Pacific, where all agencies, they come together, they assign their people, and those are the things we want to benefit from. Sometimes we have little or information to make sound decisions. We need to have a strategic plan in place. And I think if the president, once we give the strategy plan to the president from the CBM working group, you'll see the recommendations that we have, because it's a holistic approach that involves migration, it involves other issues that we have at the borders, drugs as well. I believe our people we need to be involved in these investigations, joint operations. We need to get that manifest and things. There are too many signs at the airport, too many banners. We go in there, we can't see across. So I've expressed that to Peter Paloy, so we're working together. But it's nice that we have all these banners, but it's just too much. Where's the and then the monitor, the screen? We had vapes on it. Well, it was working one day. I don't know what happened, but we need to plan and assess, collaborate, coordinate. Drug seizures. So what have we been doing? I told you this was the process when we seize drugs, what we do. Well, I can tell you, in reality, this is what's happening. We had about 228 grams of meth that was seized back in June. Our officers, during random inspection at the post office, we found the drugs, and it came from the States. We actually opened it in front of the person. This was in the front. And but because the drugs, why did the officer open it? Because he noticed that, one, when you receive government packages, it's usually in government or somebody there, but it was in somebody's name. So, and I think that's where the Postmaster General comes in, especially to deal with those people who are abusing the post office box. The drugs remain with the officer. And what we've been doing is, when we seize drugs, we call one of the officers that normally investigates drugs. He comes over, he checks, verifies, and then if it is drugs, he calls the NEU. The NEU officer will come over, and then they will just take a picture, they will do the chain of custody, and they will get a scale, and then they'll transfer everything. Now, if the person is there, we'll interview the person and do what we need to do. But at the post office, where do we take the person to interview? The only place is to take them out of the post office and go to the NEU office. So there's no place in that office. Sometimes I heard that our guys will actually go into the office and into the post area just to, get away from everybody who's processing the mail and talk to the guy. Eventually, we'll say, okay, well, if Customs has no more questions, then we'll say, okay, now you can we'll transfer the case over to you. We're transferring the drugs. So does that mean we transfer the case too? In most of the occasions, yes. We've been doing that. But now I'm telling my guys, no, you can handle this case. You can transfer the drugs to them, but work with them and discuss who's going to work the case, because we'll take it back to NEU, they'll assign somebody else, and we don't hear anything. So those are my concerns. Back in March, we had 21 grams that came in, And random inspection, we opened up the package, and it was for it's for the church. So eventually, that was 21 grams. The person was in front of us, so, you know, sometimes it's hard to do controlled deliveries because the person is already there. You know, they were, you know, the person who normally picks it up doesn't come, it's somebody else. So, you know, you really need to ask questions. Eventually the drugs get transferred over, the case gets transferred to NEU. In this case, we did work with the NEU on this case, but nothing happened. So those cases are still pending. Of course, we all know about the Chinese national who brought in drugs and the hotel and the murder. We weren't involved in that. But it does tell you that we need to have control measures in place. I was told, can we lock the bathrooms? And I said, what for? Should we put cameras in there? Is that allowed in the bathrooms? When we interview people in the airport office, should we have cameras in there so people can hear us talking and actually determine whether we're asking the right questions and before we search. So those, I think right now on the immigration side, I think we have about 900 some people that are currently overstaying in Palau. That seems to be more or less consistent with what labor has, but we've given labor, and I believe most of them are labor related. So labor now is there going over their list to see whether or not these people actually got their work visas so we can write them off. Now labor doesn't have a system in place. I don't think they even have internet because of the malware or whatever. So what did we do? We've given labor, because we have a dedicated email, we've given them access. They can get the QR code, they can see who's coming in, they can share information with us, but they've got to use that email because it's dedicated and we've got firewalls around that, our BCBP emails. I've told our employees no more using personal emails, you need to use that one. And I believe it's, so those are just the things. Otherwise, I think that's a wrap. Now we can go home.
Sila Director, malbetokal information ablam share ako na sa it's more of our interest mo understand that atritila urior. Igel specific case maybe hindi kalsalo nila ba sa specific case. Way cloud to tell about understanding na singra igel area urior sa edel milisi yung mo sa edel mingtayel Marcela ati al malbang opportunity sa area adal lo si sa ba drugs undetected. Sige da kung nasa close interest rin mo. Di kung nga sulam los ML ko highlight ta baby regel ngaringil SOPs workflow aurior niya awal bakatakla tretela gel el basic el process el gida el incorporate al sela pa aurior gumrak na si Bekkel Belua procedures. Baibag isal ko rawal gansang seda sel lakara capacity rigid utilize nganil intelligence maluba kada gather information niya maski da apprehend information are incoming al cargo ar okya ka igigid te al soy sa bayga kalori mang abay mo opera te al mata moga question our senators di sokal tiagida igagida di god di general question sa kaloger kami ako teng mlatal gramo ng oklo kami tirgal mareder kami ministers president and bring up partial issue radrox el mortir na si tiagida issue el lamo clol problem. We need to do something about it. That's one question. Kung understand ng ani sel Executive Order 475 al establish ngira 20 I think it was 2022 tiang mo will create a cell coordinated border management working group. So adal gukrameng sa aldoswil girel sa igid el group maigel effort to sa igid el working group. Na sa katagirel geringi ngani ako recommendation kami bla modar sa mora president. Malibet tigagid el ministers el wal recommend ay gagid el baby ay gagid el wal recommendation sa kami. Ay gal recommendation sa kal girel ay gel kakarousel areas that we need to improve. Sige da ongeru question na ongeru nga ongede so kal mom dingat na singani ako mechanism kami in place el wal evaluate ay gal ngaringil morur el all time wal gora sa edek na singigel wal gora test ay gal process kami amrul I'll make sure na sing it's maybe not so much 100% foolproof hindi at least ngania effectiveness ringil sa pedal adrablua ngania confidence sa tik na say hindi kal ngania sa OEK el system in place hindi kal sa take a chance el wad qura olsi sa padrak sa malubeng da olsi sa ba ay gagid el contraband lenganya MCC el enforcement MCC el system in place el detect ay seguida akmangal raw security airport al baby time ngani ge program el wal evaluate malubet tester tial system security na sing over they ngani adal wal intentionally hiring el breach security to test system. Do we have the same mechanism in place in terms of detecting our drugs sa mga gagid el contraband? Ay gigid aso adal gor armeng sa kamiuling akumda sa understanding sa resources gid limited adad ma capacity gid el carry out ay gal lurior. And if we don't start talking about them the trial explore ways in sa el milisi aurior and we will never achieve ay gigid wal ngal sa ngasin mga aun makugek na singania taltamel blam bomsit town kami president igel gwa press conference alubeng minister kami guk mo ay saktir malubeng report mortik na si igagida situation tora drugs al potentially met muling ani igagida wakyaps malubeng loopholes I recommend the actions that we need to take to address the wall caps. If you can respond to those three questions, Pastor Senators, there's a question.
Thanks, Chair. For the CBM working group, one of the things we did when we first started was we did an assessment. We had a consultations that was through UNDP and Palau. And the project that we're currently involved in is for Palau, Vanuatu, and Fiji. Because of COVID, we wanted to look at COVID as an example of a way we could learn from that and strengthen our borders. Now, because of that, we had a regional consultation, and then we had about 3 in Palau. And then I believe we should, but we all focused on identify what were the main issues for Palau, concerns. One of the concern when we first, before the executive order came out, the assessment was one, we need to have a committee, and that's why we created the CBM working group. And we're the only ones in the region that has done it by law, by executive order. Vanuatu has a working group, but there's nothing mandating them to meet. The role of the CBM working group is really to bring in border and other agencies, related agencies and stakeholders. So we have 2 chairs, our Minister Obiang, Minister Udui, they chair, but through Peter, Director, and myself, we represent them as co-chairs. Then we have the working group. We have the Attorney General, we have Customs, Director, Immigration, Labor. We also have the Postmaster General. We have the National Security Coordinator, We have the Director of Health, Labor, and who else? He represents agriculture at the meetings.
No, nga niya capital executive order gimadang, so we already know
Right,
those
right.
information.
So-
just
So we meet every month, and we've been able to identify issues. One of the good things that happened after creating the executive order was we said, hey, we need a strategy plan that needs to be developed. Through the assessment, we developed a strategy plan, and I'm holding the draft in my hand. And one of the things we looked at was our national security, our economy, and the social obligations that we have. We came up with strategies, and of course, governance was an issue. Legislation needs to be in place to identify many of the problems we have. We have old, outdated legislations. So we did look at that. Executive orders, MOUs, and agreements, those were problems. If we didn't have one, we had an old interagency agreement from 2008. The operational arrangements that we have, we need to do that. So one of the things, first thing we did on this was when we did the MOU with the public safety. Because we wanted marine law officers, we had our own maritime program, but we wanted them to also be a part of the marine law. When they go out, they can enforce the immigration laws, biosecurity laws, customs laws, not just fisheries. So that was one way. There's also an MOU with the we have one with the FIU with respect to intel investigation and sharing of information. We also have one pending right now with biosecurity. And so all these MOUs, we looked at that, we put that together. But those are the things we need to revisit. One of the plans also was to establish a joint risk assessment center. Why? Because it's important that we, like some other countries do, they have all the intel goes to one place. Anything that happens, and then they disseminate that. If it has to do with marine law, if it has to do with customs, or then you process that in real time. We looked at the administrative arrangements that we have, and a lot of things that have happened. If there was an issue with labor, we even have an SOP with labor, because the complaint was immigration is the bottleneck. Why are you guys holding on to the applications too long? Why? Because we need to do the background checks. We work with the Attorney General, she makes recommendations, and the National Security Court. So we identified those strategies, and we looked at other models. So we've been working very hard to look at our respective areas, and not to work in silos, but to come together and say, hey, we have these. Health came up and said, hey, what are we going to do about fentanyl? Do we have test kits? Is our people trained? Do you need training? Migration policy, we're looking at that. Labor is taking the lead and reporting to us, and so we have a workshop coming up on that, and so we look at all the risks, and we try to determine how we can facilitate those things. So the CBM working group is good. I recommend that we continue with that. One of the things that really needs to be focused is on maybe the operational level as to how our agents, because when the directors and all of us meet, we're just focused on the arrangements, administrative arrangements that we have. Hey, can we do this? Yes. But at an operational level, you need to have that framework in place so that we can, it spells out, the SOP spells out how we are, our roles and responsibilities. So with the CBM, that's what I have to say about that. How do we test our current mechanisms? You want to answer or respond? Or you want me to go on?
I just want a really quick answer from you. Have you discussed this with the President and the Minister, the departments who are in charge of the agencies governmental? I want to hear from you or to understand, do you recognize there's a problem with drugs in Palau? And if this is an issue, the direction has to come from the top. And there has to be resources that to be allocated toward these recommendations. Those are the recommendations, plans, ka direction from the top to tell us, allocate our resources toward the effort. We're just not achieving anything. Sige da sokal mom nangalil from tiagida executive order 475 milgat mokla. Ngania what's ngania effort na put in our resources to make sure ay recommendations sir kami blam Sierra Senate kada mo pursue gigi the recommendation or we just not recognizing nga problem na drugs sa belam.
So each of us, we return, we go back, report to our ministers, and every week, for example, I report to my minister on the things that we're doing. We have weekly reports that are due every Tuesday. We are going to provide this strategy plan to the president for his review and approval. And I even asked, I sent the email this morning, and and then the power went off. But I asked him, can we share this with you guys? Because I think you'll understand the issues and the recommendations that needs to be put out. So we've already got the plan in place. The president needs to review that. It's done. The only problem is the format. So we have somebody working on the format right now to make sure that it's acceptable to the format that should be presented to the president. And once he gets that, then you should have that. But yeah, mechanisms that need to be in place. We need to test our processes and all the time. It's not a one-time thing and then it sits on the shelf.
Yeah, and it's going to take resources to do all those. So I'm hoping at masing mosabil report malibem pusra armereder gidem bol sabil al recognize egal problem able sabil annex el budget malibem supplemental budget almel ngania some kind of request for resources and most other implement the recommendations. And it doesn't make any sense as kung kada ngatiang masada issues ma problems ma recommendations al may submitter budget and kal support tay kay del domdasol lungin recommendations ti ngulmor segi de open te al material go paper senators kalababo vice chairman na committee.
So te al chairman director, there's only two things the Senate can help you with. Two. One, problem rala. So we need a clear list of laws that need to be amended to help you do your job more effectively. Or new law. I know you've talked about the Customs Act, but if there are others that need amendments and so forth, that's what we can do. And number two, the chairman brought it up. We can give you money if you need it. So if we don't know you need money, we can't give it to you. So those are the only two things we can do. We can talk about your policies and your procedures and your operation, but that's really your internal operations. That's between you and other agencies. That's between you and the ministers. That's between you and the president. But what we can only do here is fix the law and give you money. Well, now that I have that set aside, two questions, and I'm going to limit to them to air side and sea side. Okay, so when we're at the airport, you've talked about a passenger coming in through immigration and going through baggage claim and then through biosecurity and out the door. That's great. It sounds like you have controls there. What happens beside the aircraft? And I'm going to bring this up because recently I saw in the news that there were a group of about 4 flight attendants, I think it was something like that, that were flight attendants in, I think they were based in Miami, but basically they were carrying cash back and forth for drug cartels. So my question is, you're looking at inside the terminal. Who's watching the guy who's putting fuel in the plane? Who's watching the guy who's unloading baggage? Who's watching the guy who's hooking up that truck that empties the not so good stuff out of the plane? The cleaners of the plane, the operators of the jetway, and the flight attendants and pilots and crew that go in and out of the aircraft. Because they sort of have special privileges that regular passengers don't have. And then I'll go to Seaside next.
So I'm glad you mentioned that because we've recently done an assessment. We went up to the airport, looked at areas of concern. And one of the questions that we discussed was, okay, the flight comes in, our officers, they clear all the passengers, and then they leave. Whose responsibility is it to monitor and do that? One of the responses I had was, well, I think there was a recent FAA, the FAA was there, and then now all of a sudden we came back, doors were closed, gates were locked, we didn't have access, we couldn't go in to this area, but we all have operational roles to play. Security, can we trust them? Can they do their job? Are we all on the same level? So that's the administrative or operational arrangements. We need to do that. I know when I was off island, they had a airport security meeting, and involved, so they reinforced the badges, for example. So immigration and customs and we're all about controls, making sure we have the controls in place so that we can prevent these things from happening. So one concern was, should I put a guy there just to watch that plane until the aircraft leaves? And then one response was no, because nobody can get in or out. Well, how do we know? And who's going to pay the overtime? Or is that something we should observe? Those are the concerns we have.
Well, that's exactly my point. I mean, you've got a great, what it seems like, great border control once those passengers have exited the jetway and entered the terminal. But what happens outside? Yeah, there's a fence, but those people going and approaching the aircraft, are they being controlled when they leave that fence? So I'll leave it with you, but I feel that that's an area that needs to be looked at. Second is seaside. We all know when a ship comes in, a pilot goes on board. He probably doesn't go on board not wearing any clothes. He probably has a backpack. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the pilot. I'm just saying he's boarding a vessel with a backpack. These things are small. Is anybody checking the pilot when he gets off the vessel? While the vessel is transit from pilot station to port, is there any idea if anything's being thrown overboard? Now, once the vessel's at port, those crew members, if it stays overnight, do exit the port and roam around Malacca. Is anyone checking them, bringing anything off the vessel? I mean, we're checking the containers, we're inspecting containers, but that whole process, are we looking at that? And that's just the commercial vessels that come in regularly. What about pleasure yachts and fishing boats? And these are all border management issues, and they're things I see and wonder if you have something in place to address these possible gaps. Sulang.
Ulitasil sa akti sel editora airside algonya nakal vice chairman na nganyar officers teregel mo receive aigel document tra flight sel belger daskogi tamo maigel document manifest, and they do mamatengal morio and monitor abin, and they do also monitor a cargo moso is balgel United. As for the port side, vessels may boarding agora may kill overnight al rogul passengers in memteng gim chegaptir. Normally we work with bellow transfer, so nganya adan metuo de loba backpack, and then you have to go through the customs and biosecurity nganya obviously ang rapport to so geden mo klorong do asing nganya adults in messel sulang.
Kalabara, Senator Mi.
Sulang direktor ko malungila igel murun. Ti follow up parcel issue le mlamo rasa Western. Kuadira kan local issue lagi bo gimi. Ing akmadenge kwase sel baby lengaria bilasan mo. Mas try melir tirgel puy gama amlil dokol. Ila si logger daklalo. Ese labor yoma. Yung last in malongas ending dia ko tingak masih kom chegrario masel kuklaming dia. Sige da dire kal gisangal tara issue maigal bilsingir aigal bilsingir ar other ngarbela dire kal mal bioter tira meter other outside. Enam awek koseng ngaria ko mal bagarur tel erter kamiul 300 tel quadri katal gisal mara lenga nga mo ngam ngatakla mo nga 25 miles tira katal gisang. Kadi oger kosing ngara
Sel isura Southwest Mr. Senator amting ikmutia inter-island and they'll require customs and mochera sumanga to open may. Hindi, of course, ang nganya intel sa nganya otherwise wasing there's tararole la sibelo si sa bakralo and then we'll act under intel. Hindi, for biosecurity reasons, ang nganya inter-island quarantine, sa go kelpertil monitor summa other Southwest Island also certain species of lomlong alabang dire nganya inter-island quarantine sa monitor yan mesois para selod nganya for example nganya tal time nganya siliga bird flu nganya executive order to bird flu may mandate to sa biosecurity amlo mo help sa inter-island quarantine. Hindi as far as customs dialing inter-island of course ang kanya intelling customs will act on the intel. So lang.
Halitik follow up kung sulang chiba kung das yung mal kodokora kay ngisera udaso lek madenge kwasya direktora na mention sel ligar fishery system se also kung mandia kal register del true reggae del system menda kasi del masasel dial to reggae dial lamgodol bloseng blue boats adia ka AIS dia ka VMS system ring so they're basically in the dark. But if they call me on a sat phone, I know exactly where they are. You won't see him on that system over there. So kita kwadi concern director mong ulmak akpring abring you know we hear these stories. I think it's important for us to wara mo adol girele kami tam la wara lui sige executive order makadabring upbringing and I hope at least they know we're aware and hopefully you're aware mga wala ngania ko dire real girel makti magulise umsulang ya kumdas you guys have a lot of stuff on your plate and hopefully we can do something about this.
Chair, with respect to intel, over the past 2 weeks we've been developing our intel. We brought in officers, we had a form, we asked them to provide intel. Anything. It could be anything that related that they know of or anything that, but the threshold that we have when we look at intel is reasonable suspicion. Is it reasonable to believe that this person is involved in this thing or that thing? So one of the things that we're looking at as a part of the single windows is is to provide our officers. The single windows is where information is processed one time, and I know you know, but it's just it's like the automation, how to make best of use of that and involve that in your operations. So if you want to clear, you have something, medicines coming in and you need to get a certificate from a hospital, then you just process this form one time and then instead of going to the hospital and going these other places, you just come and it's processed online. You know, a lot of our clearances now, we don't have people coming in to process entries at customs anymore. It's done online. So the next vision, the next step is to process your have a single windows with and to ask each agency, well, who is going, what we're going to ask them, what are your requirements and do you want to participate? So we've already spoken with agriculture. They don't have a system. With the minister, they want to, when they're going to take out fish, you know, they want people to, you know, when you apply for permits, those are the things. But yeah, right now, what we want to do now is any intel that we get, we'll use this app, and it'll come to our intel investigations. They'll screen that, and it could be on your phone, it could be in the system. So that's one of the things that we just brought it up because the expert is here. He came in, and he's here for the year or until next year, and that's the project that we have. But we need to do a blueprint and find out who wants to get involved, what's the cost, and all that stuff. But intel is a very important part of what we do. We need to have advanced information before. the maritime domain workshop that we had last week. I was only in there for 2 days because I couldn't take part in the rest, but they mentioned a very good thing. Do I go to the Southwest? And I told the instructor, what for? Is there intel? Do we have the resources? Do we have the means? We had a boat, but is there a reason to go there? Should we, monitor? Going there is not a problem, but the problem is the logistics. Do we have, all these things in play? And everything also comes down to finalizing our SOP. We're doing that. We're doing that for the K9. Right now, we've been doing a lot of things. That's why every day I go home, I have headache.
Now, malungil information. We agree that we definitely need to build our intel database to help you to make decisions. Taral convince sa minister, president mal allocate our resources al gira ang maklaw total el aspect or. Adi sa TL sugi naman. Okay, kabang vice chair ko klaba.
The last follow up Marcel tingnan umi. Hindi ka dil pleasure craft mura Southwest and outside. Maria boat, bars, fishing boats and murae, and they just come back to their own docks. What happens at those docks? Who do they meet out there? Possibly. According to Ms. Camille, something to think about. That's it.
Yan diri kal jawang gila kuk airside. Dikadoren masen diri kal ngarinyar. Arma paget sel mera sela skogi tirkal moklina. Magirak masaikal bilis diri kal dekat sel kuk murtal sa skogil tu asurt sa skogi foral. Ya di surt sagal baget sra al petengra utu dinguk tikal sel murtal skogil tu asurt sa tel skogi.
Yes, the K9 can go in. We have the authority to go in, but the airlines don't like it because, they don't want dogs. What they're responsible. They're responsible for cleaning the plane, preparing it for the next. But they don't like it. But we do go in if it's necessary.
Yeah, because we've heard that there are cases are cleaners and mega connection. So ngayon bilis lo tura sa tels ko hindi kal swala United madiak. Tiang border gidel sumsubel muda tu. Hindi kal United a dictator gid.
So one of the things we're doing now is we're beefing up our enforcement and investigations, especially intel. Without intel, it's hard. In November, when is that? November. Right now, we just got invited to go to Hong Kong under the WCO and to bring 2 K9 officers. So we plan on strengthening our K9 program. So that's always been our goal is to, where do we find dogs? One dog is like 10 grand. We've asked Australia, or maybe even more, just if you include the freight and PGST and everything else. But, right now, through the WCO, those are the things we plan on taking advantage of. So right now it's the start of a very good relationship, and we're involved in a number of programs involving our bureau.
Kita tinggal minta mal isetera igatel program lagi ina le gilan media ka lokal mongil mang los mere adap satela ina mo ani question ni nga rukle kortil outside kami
malungil si director ma postmaster ma Raul atang artyang kadiga ko nga statistics. So last 2-3 years en kuratelang namotelal incident tara kura drugs almet mura bordera encounter telar ngiyam lamo nga charges ngiye the ngara kura starus rahi either rogui ngara kura success rate argi
So over the past years, we did do a performance report. We did indicate the number of seizures that we've had, whether it was intel driven, whether it was by random, whether it was information from NEU or the post. We have a very strong relationship with the post office, and we really understand our roles. But yes, we do have statistics, but in terms of seizures and joint operation. Yes, we do have that. But as far as what happened after that, the cases, and maybe the AG and EU, they can provide that statistics. But as far as putting everything together and having a joint, I think that's one of the things we need to do, to kind of measure and see, okay, we've had this many seizures. How did that come about? Was it just by random inspection? And the type of drugs? Was it through intel? The post office, right now, I can say a lot of the seizures that we've had, they're all from the States. And it's not like before. It was always Manila. We don't see, and I'm sure that those are the only ones that are being reported compared to those that, have come in. We get intel about how somebody got there. There's a lot of drugs in, and I said, well, how did it come in? Well, it's in, but we don't know. So that's where we need to know what was the method of concealment, where did it come from, how was it brought in, and yes, we have those control measures in place at the airport ports. Then I'm sure we can tighten up things. But the intel is the most important thing. We don't have that. I can tell you one thing: in one of the Pacific Islands, right now, every month, 40 pounds of meth coming in. Saipan, it's only 2 pounds. 40 pounds. The FBI came in and took all 6 guys. People there. I don't know if it's been reported, if you've seen that, but I know that's one of the things that was shared with us, and so I'm sure 40 pounds.
So will mo provide the statistics for the last 2-3 years?
Yeah, I can do that on our part, but
Maybe
I don't know if
just
you want
later.
everybody to report and see if it all measures up. But it could be 2 grams, and then by the time it goes to NEU, it's only 1.5. I don't know, but I'm sure it's all there. That's a joke. So anyway, but I think, yes, I think we can look at that. I know 2023, this year alone, we've only had 2 seizures at the post office. There was one late last year. I'd have to go back and look at that. But every week we get reports on what's been confiscated or detained, seized, things like that, so we can report on that.
Nasing club to trail direct from the policy standpoint, will direct understand that nasing wara amount igal the seizure igal border, especially gigil carousel areas. Leng adoreng sendirek walgong makloa marmurtra al sila belum bulgulak nasi. So adal kamom danglik mengwara ratio igay gidel the seizure drugs ma compare al morsel guk lang mo el mera al sila blue for distribution. Ako mas tayo altigal beber senators, and then so adal allogators el wal final hour til hearing al guk mo mes igay gidel urior atokra post office leng Diregal mag koraklo information do laringil adablu mar adal gukara interested ay gay gidel tokra draxel laseng maklo metmura dra post office way gel lamdu diregal so adal mom dingek maseng ngaraigel area post office sa adal gukara malisi mo ada gigringi se gidel te alm kaba postmaster di da sate alela talam sa mal guklo gera
Mansaule chairman agulite di bakta tunga agel gukta tretelela post office ng lamos sabel guk dimolda agel kami mera director mga kara tokora rolela igagidel mihitel klalo met murbelao agoteng post office rigida amodelo sa 1994 kadamlo givsel compact service agreement kadamlo bangela agreement lo bangela USPS tel post office gid tirak lagel ula USPS al magero kuil agencies ram rigel lo bangel mari Homeland Security ma US Department of Treasury magagidele TSA magel gupebira agencies ra mrigel المنغار معلومة تم تبع لا تغرر لا ميل كده أسل نياف مالورة لا بوست أوفيس هذه بلغتاق له أسل كده من سبع أقرأ مير أجيل نارين على هذا الدروق الميرنجيل هذا نيا جيل المملارين سيا مالورة لا igagid le post office mangway segid ngaria angel dodulo aseng postal inspector nga sila post office lo mesa igagid el bek lula post office mang ndal mitamal ya diregal ngari gel diregal mugul adol durok ra sila post office agel niya adodula sing sel mo ulangaw malubun sa lobu explosive may gagid el mit telgar hindi ngired mangel wasya post office adiakal niya alimos karole la siraber ma osiga tora mit telgar agigiram lultu ragel kuk pebir obis ma aladra qabilment tergid rablur belaw customs ma igel niya kuk abla pulis lobang kama mar adra post office lawror akti mokodobnya a presentation nga kale director am lakaber igel betokol tele lagi mda kaloror akpay di mo o ay silwasing ay kita igel korawal mo uling mring le tia luror adoru ringi tia post office kita amal matong kato ngaltangat tal mo sa el mawdo dara di oil di mlo osper break rail hindi betokol klalo madongur kita nga alsila mlamo di over 10 years rigil computer kita ma arugul to ulim mo como wasingaram mo dal sa traka clocklet computer sige nga sa post office amla mo over 10 years aigel scanner sige man dimut plus de help tial makmad adengi maul man diregal mo toka amadul el clocklet atara diregal mo uling mo mring laurior ngara sila sel compact agreement waseng girel ngaringia a postal processing center airport se girel ngaringi misel gerda ay galme raskogi endi malmal tel ngara tilaskogi murtel moltmur al sel segid el processing center a post office ngara airport engya momra la siraber aurora ngi elanga alito tulti agid lurereder el alsils ang wase labora airporteng ay gadi mga sils maul madungwala bolore da aurora tirgagid el adra custom mangwala di bolore del luguk murura ureri aluguk polla kal mutmuk aurora mutmur alsela segid el storage ra UA ya next thing engire global mera post office melasel mera post office elangin katangal-tangat te segid ludo dara adi oil dingilul me mergo renovate mlo sebe del gukora gilungi selbak melangin ngogi angiluror customs tegid el dodula sing coordinated border management team kamama amlamot magluror segid el luror airport amlamos edel gukngul merabagara post office mangmutel mo ngaria close luror adra customs malmutel mo komakail el siraber ay gaklalo ay gida tele el gelur ela ay gal box ra gida post office adi 2,825 mal makasay segid el mawula tara mondaya kida rokul adar bela di sierra box misel bol ngaria gora wal talmalela klalo el metmur asela gal box intara momring rula siraber mauriora al adal low box sama kau talakla segid atara mo talmalela aurior endi kadam lagu kogi atara al doul ya by next year en modi ar adal gil sierra box adir adalo box lo sierra box atirgel tira adipendent tergau ngara box tergau kadam la create e-box el altamen kadam la approve USPS amla approve 5,000 mumla mosbir arbekla adal el mera post office radi el alsils apply agi meska boxen mumla modiagal namo segid el guk mo problem ra ora mo kautel akla modiak ela direk bladgat maklira post office sel omeng sel bodola klaluringi amla modi asim la di mral motmu la modi alsem guk mral metto mor alsel segid el window el digal tanga ngaringi le sel digal tanga ngaringi mergo ya kamera ngamadam wal aklela madam kadamo mdir muqaw amla qongel momlar ti aklal nga amla qongel wa ngara el girel mo sodel ti aklal esola dia ba morut ti aklal sel ngay ega almut almosois sel sim almora obisra customs ya adra post office angu ay gagidele esegid el paget ngun sanga adra customs tiagid el process angara CCTV malsum mo ngarngia agora talaman nga sel tiagid el paget en documented el CBE de los peria law enforcement ay gagid lolgo a directo lo hace ma atogorore la ma otutela la ma gargril as ilos pe ay del lurior kadak mulo aseng ngaria blar lia atiagi del lurior gimot ma lurior kausel ma mulgorngi chairman lo aseng kita rogul metengay betok on ngosong sri da blur belao dia kaudude del el digut mok la igar rogul toy tirigal malmina sulela a director talgon mla ko o da bebira ang esura UN magigid el guk mosbil mo ara bebira o mokpesa gel CCTV gidra post office e dirigal sil mosiklolele talamo upgrade aigal al computer system sa post office agigid gel bebira rural القدت ما على قد موك لا يقال دون ورجيد ما أيقال نيا فاسيلتي رجيد إن ديرك المرين لا دو ورور التيال الترقال مدنرين العاب أبل أويل لو سيكرولي لتا أول بلديت تيال سيستم من ديال سيدل دي ديقدو إمبروف أيقال السيستم رجيد إذا دول أسيق دوم دي مرتين من سيجيدا غورا دي سوغال دولي لو أسيا كمام عمال مرين لورور رابك السيلز limited of resources ramam may gagide le agelnya agi mospe rabek السيلز اندي كده ملاس من مرة كرباب اتياجي دلتور ادراك سا اكتيف شغل دي او ايسو اسئله السيلز الدناتيان ام لا موناري حتى اورور اللونت مقرين بوست اوفيس السيلز الويلو ريرا ادراك استوم ما ادرا بوست اوفيس يغدوك ملا اكو كنت مقلع ترى اورور اجي كده جيل جيم داغل اورور ان يا مورنيا سبيل مقتمق مسبق قرب الوقت سولان
Sulang enseguida presentation na post office na kuam na mo blakatak la kurir post office in collaboration with customs may la kada di ogera question el gire la gigil guk nam dungul to telam saulo la orga nguk mo kwartey
Sula chairman malugil tulat si semega director ma postmaster general kongora waisak mengarngia ai sur gemiura bax letop to lado espera di mol bax sen me drax mo mring gemiua dia agora un partnership gemiu lo ventrada ngar outside sebrul identifier a other send ai raklal en me ngaria gig to go working relationship gemiu ma ai gal go postal service recreate bela
Waise senator ngaria selskumang mornya problem ra imol package in sabe del logi auror ekada malgol mora post office ra especially ablo amrigel and it provide agerogul footage ra angel adam lol durak crosel el package el merbelaw in fact ngaria gay serbelaw الملقت موق الديريق السبعة اللي يجي الويت لا يجي لو بنجيلها بوست اوفيسر بيلاو المرا او بنجيلها يو اس بي اس ملقت موق
Sula postmaster director ngaria gel mention about total challenges la face a Bureau gal gerela number of personnel gal monitor egal lurior direct ngani limited facility gamiul so other message I give the reporter gamiul el motor de lo que va request gamiul mer olvida la en so other helper gamiul el mere de los ciclolel prevent egal drugs man der sal moclor at selablo del ngrang director mogiut tial Bureau of Public Safety el diaga permanent el director ni radar hablo a coramul telak placendiaga mal confidence tira a law enforcement hablo bela ermuterela direct la explain Aurelio ma que responsibility sermil gerela about their protection direct mal important mangiriul amo o toda report mi ma request mi egostau traklung la do del muspenil gerela igal lurel morul municipal civil olvirar lo sicrolele el otro daudo de lo nacer mi e direct un considera au dudira adolorior le segundo diagam increase au dudira adoloriore e di eda more responsibility mortir in sebril mo ulen da lungil perform al talbo ngau du ngilu do o ngilu dudir e mo se ir el mo ngilu e giriul considera ige dado de clase natal promoter admira gano moregal 6 months el gerelang sa clau dudir le tilungil logro director loger le knarmik saknuwa kom la haira Ismail Agwan seng maral tokoy kung consultant ra bureau ra border and custom and border asum kom la hiring raurele.
So for the under the UNDP project, we had a request for all these equipments, and then a part of the discussions was if you need to bring in a consultant, they can do that also. We were looking for a law enforcement consultant who can help us do exactly that: provide SOPs, provide look at do an assessment for 4 months, and to actually assist us, not in being involved in a law enforcement officer or in that capacity, but to work under the director, myself as a consultant. And we did that by first doing one with the IOM consultant for immigration. The guy came in, we didn't have one in Palau, but the IOM said, if you have somebody locally who can do the work, that's great. But for immigration, we didn't have anybody. So the consultant came from Australia. I think we met with him, and his mandate was, for example, to look at the immigration laws, come up with recommendations, and do regulations. So, and he did some trainings, looked at our processes, and that was only for 4 months. So our discussions with UNDP went the same way. They asked us, do you have somebody locally that we can engage? Because their hiring process would take months, or it would take and we would follow. So we brought him on board. We because I understand that he also has a contract with the hospital. So and through the CBM working group, I talked to the director of health. He goes, yeah, we've got that. It's only for this much, and because of that, and I said, oh, okay, well maybe we can do for 4 months. So we had funding, and we went through the process, and we brought it in. But he's only there now to assist us until September 3rd. So the plans we had placed, it's only between now. So a lot of what we've been doing is focusing on 3 things: intel, developing our intel capacity, developing the investigation and inspection process. So in line with that, we've looked at our process. What happens? We've looked at all the laws. We looked at our order functions. But in no way was he ever involved in any operations. He's only there to provide under the terms of reference of the contract that we had. So, yeah. So anyway, he's only there until it's only been about a month, 1 month, and that's it. So we recognize the need to have a consultant, and it's always good to have somebody that we can, especially if they're here locally. That kind of experience. I mean, I brought him on board because I knew for a fact that one, he would be coming in because, remember, he used to work for the DA. He's an expert in drugs. He may have the skills, but if that was a problem, then it was beyond my scope. But yeah, he's only there until next week.
Sula Directora, da lumagugera, Bureau of Public Safety maluspira at mga civil direct mga dadura presidente while hiring mo permanente and mo Directora Bureau of Public Safety le. Kadog spera rung ilado lo riorma. Tim legay di Director sila.
Sula talam se le ora corte ku lebera tabalwale le oral me.
Sulang chair maldong corte oran sa garro lo do edi ru remela awaseng kide rogul ngartiang da gru asaria problem ra drugs ra al selablu belo. Kadong o dahil nga sa'yo, magyalgo ko di unqualified intel and there are other marula drugs al selbelo. Not yet anyway. Question na nga chair kote akong dasula sa sumo do al sumong kara di kredaw ke klalo niya bere malak do sa utri. Dil sumo dom dasula sa burden niya amran ngar sayid, which I think it is. And it's a border level almost an emergency. So why are we not behaving like it's an emergency? Aktiyo kere director because katrastar adra ablay. Katrastar adra ablay.
Well, trust has to be earned. But coming from customs, you got to know everything about the person, about the business, and that's one of the changes we're doing in management. So I don't know. What does you've got to do background checks? It all depends.
Kasi katrastar adra ablay.
The officers, my officers.
And I don't mean just you. I mean the whole system. The trustar adra ablay.
Well, I have to put my faith and trust in my officers, especially if we prepare them, train them, and make sure they understand their roles. But if we just bring them in and I put them next to the next guy, and the guy's just sitting there, said, "No, I'll teach you my way." It's
Well,
my
it's
way.
a question.
That's the problem.
It's a question for you, but it's indirectly for everybody.
Right.
Because I think if we're serious, we have to clean the house. And don't please lang the word naive enough to say that the house is clean. May your house is clean, but
now my house is dirty when I come home and I start yelling. But in practice, it's the same thing at work.
Yeah. So
everybody needs to do their part, and if they don't, it becomes a problem.
Ako lang chair I say maybe from this outcome of the hearing that's been going on for a really long time, there has to be a statement that will say, look, if it is that important to spend that time in the and they will say, ngariyan nga apply school right now as we speak. They are getting involved. And are we serious enough to put our resources? Resources we can always struggle with that, and the chairman always and means. The president ta senate ng artya. Immigration custom, post office. We know it's a halway sa lumiw. Ngam lang nga era ulay. And I saw packets ko na tama malaring yung budulablilyo. I've seen it with my own eyes. So I'm only saying, I'll outcome the president ta senate. Medyo more national attention. Please, ang temela politics. Let's not get to that place. Let's really address it because most statraklu is alive too late. Makulit kasi
outcome tel meeting bor sa igid. Side on ti emro.
Chair, if I may, malsuaksel question ra Senator Cuarte, mergid rogui. Sera book on board. Hindi at siya kalumral waseng hindi ka dumrar adal dadaglo nga ka mle conductra, directestra, employee ra a post office. Diregal mal expensive. Hindi gired el rulil tokoiling maknoto da bebira a fund ra budget nga el moruli leng asum dia abot serius lo aser adlo uror gired lo umrartir en tel problema dimel mol makmal akswaksel grila a senator cuartel merido rogui. Are we serious? Are we willing to commit gigidel sesel ngari resource gigidel smisi auror?
Sula postmaster sula quartera mal lungit point point out ngi akum das still ay mal tabadapo ko al tokol gire del rogul lo kakarkera dolong ledek nasing how serious do we see this issue. Tabalwal hindi kala ko igamal guklangan ya question nga.
Sorry, Chair. Ako te postmaster ka director material weklat. Mena asuli tiada kalsan maldo asek da gerak pai di ako ni tangis remiu emoduli tial girel tial CBM nakalwi de mensal dia director cloud tutrel sel CBM directora el al sil sedang artiang em ai de rak 25 days yang expire in 25 days truata adal tiang Teterul Minister, ma-AG, ma-National Security Coordinator, ma-SIC are 8 directors. Iral sil segidang artial, ang alel tial, egel duties and responsibility mas atu. Assessment, track analysis regarding present capacities for coordinated border management, ma-facilitation and risk management measures for the movement of goods, people, including terminal drugs. Al suko mengederra kalau bat tel urur tiga gidel ade direktur. Ederra kamdera lui ma em klub seng modia. Egidang artial mendengin wasa drugs rabela klungang edegal gegre. Etiada acceptable to all mer other below. Director, this is not acceptable when you have this many ministers, AG, 25 people, 8 directors. Dia ka adel rule tial kami tilo sekali makara akut makli tial urur. Ya intel dia kamsan mendengen dirbek la tadi mendengai. Akara merara blur bela rela ma babal dawa ngani. $10 a pop, that's what I hear. Makariga ka uling intiya si kami yung Maria Peredela rami urtial urior. Trigar ng alagid. Trigar ng alagid baby rigid. El almer builang mamrek tial CBM. Yak meron okor tial dia ka otsusir tial was tiang rather ulel program. Bagian masa ada direktur asing ngania isura ngarang clear airport. Nga minister lo ngarang airport lo okritel kami tirgaw. Tiyak ang clear ngartia. Ngania ngasang sila lo nga minister finance lo dal tiyak program. Kom ngarang ok lo ngarang tokoy albang ngarang lo ngarang laigal tokoy. El alsil senya kasul semua daiga. Karena lagi dah kami matmada dalam aku. Sekida postmaster amal ko kuning ase. Kabom lutul sel obom todo bom adadu. Ebom kakarga dong lelo se kami bom ngani abere de larang mi trigal ngalagi dah ma belwad girel tial toy maluben dia.
Albulsyo ala babiar el malungin la SOP. Elang arga dal mangalingin lang it's not working. Akmalungi tanya sur kami lang tirgal ngal kambalos pe angeso. Elakal kami aso bakal trir. Oye kang moy. Disel da saurol ada obak klamat raurol lol diket kaurol emok lorngut. Dindira atak pura amal dir nomor ka alsang engel tarado si ngura mal klodrak se dia kan masawa dringi rablu bela kardi masawa udo kardi masawa skela udo de dia kan masawa rangal kama atel mule legal maran gen makmal doli te director kama postmaster makmin arta se akhda mal gain selo dokat ke tiang di director I know tiada kal din ngar alem kau ya di ngar engel tel committee di tagi del CBM I hold them accountable. In 25 days at the expire, if we have more issues than today than yesterday, edegi salwa sengarnya otsusir tial CBM. Gora maskida sengarnya ungil rol maral mem kadang matmok ni nakluku. Aktio trok wase bom street tigal ader tiang, ya kom adal tial alaf. Em kakargel wase. Ngara kom adal tial ngararang mi adal tiang. Ada kom adal tial di belsa alwase ngarinya CBM. Ado kira isu radrak so ngarinya CBM. We want actual work. Dia kasoma yal paperwork. So ada urur rabalul lo dige tarar temo sol akla ada sida man sa otro klik ramule to spe ange sala. Thank you.
Chair. Mansaula Senator Tabalwaleng sulang ra selungil diregal tigem Malaysia arma marat raurior aktiregal lo ay selwasea ngogiwa ontila post office ma customs el mora ablura siabal eta momskida agelia state of the art ligagidele x-ray machines agida medingel wasea blur ada dborngir el amlamo Aurora amlamo dia kal ngartial dil el open space el chega klalo. Age bel ol dingara a backroom et chega torngem malu bet chega pagay chergau emergo e clear et mai mong elak de namom de mong lo asesegi del capacity dia gargi deleng aigal mesir gidel al chils adiregal el namo a capacity niya mlamo di kalsa el kutmuklauror leng a post office by design en ngilel mlara 1,000 pounds el mail sira relate al post office el alsil seng el 7,000 pounds mail ra talbuil el al tal Sunday aigel niya low week and sa edlo aseng ngara 10,000 pounds. Aigel niya high peak season, ekad mo hit ra 15,000 pounds ra week. Mang aigagidal dolgoy lo asya skumigida dia kada diregal da sam akli da ma ada da sam oklay galurere da ma adongurgi da ma klise edra uror ekad mo til artiak lungela omray me sois brablu. Mengarnya aigal niya togora drugs mal meter niya direk klornya ngaram rigel me endi rigel a decide lo asea male ram rigel merbelau a domestic male ndigal chega a male el merbelau ndi waitilal mulgorngi senet lo ase agel ngara to obel mera orior kada check ngorawal dia kal seguida el chegra blura Miguel ngire del belau am agirelo o ciclolele moita udo del mo mrula gagi del sistema rigid el mo sebe del sirabera igalurur ma kadaguk multangatra sel ngesora blura siabal age director I think it's over $3 million age gidel x-ray el bolomski del mo X-ray mora airport, mamora post office, mamora ngamala la Malagal port. المولنسير كيدرا المسبئة المرأة المتيغة يجيل نيا كلال المسويس رابلو بيلاو. So senator kada siga aldoula etila gid المولغور نيا aswadar adar بيلاو لاسي بولا قادراكس المتموع مسبئة المو مغتموكلا.
التيري كريتيا لاسي كمان صورتي التقون دي تقتلي تيان مالمو أورون ليتيا. Dia algil na okorti amin na ura siabal mel sobra ng algid. Gariola gram dia algid dia mo to do mo sobra ng algid ang arteo se kada saula ra siabal to do mem mo sebedan sa akra ng algid. Se soadra al sel tia gilad to do mo aizro sentela aral tia claro edo oral le mo sel bakler ng algid. Ela kada dong okorti ang edo se mo saula tal mo mertiamong Dia belwad akmal lulu ka post master lo sembelwad magdoren so se meudo del mera postum bolungil tiam bol seb el sel baklar ngalga ako tetangal geda mengida imada mortir e pudong ita ngi sarai krelakti duli se gidin el ada du lang 25 days e kam ngodo du ramsil trigdo ngir maralme aktio ai se gigil du ling Kuramo murundi adang kura kapangartia dia kal seda subak tirangal gid emingir range surak munggel mei ya pai temre dan makawangi kalau sobertin mere del time sulang
halik tria obengel seltinya la tabalwal malungil point akum daseng tel tokol presence is deterrence presence is deterrence tel lulukornya senator sangabau magulukornya girela ay gal ngara southwest del may mamuras kogi ngarya arma del bilis el altam ulugum kam dingung kal bilis ngult murteng erule advertisement ese deterrence el morar adra drax tilga ka umula kargid migid muduguk murura ureret le dorura ureret la bagal resources segid ngarya drelli ralol gornya tabul wal mu adongi la udo del ngara outside del mi segid adi point el so medo spe ay gal ngarya digid edo spe aptulu de tral deter tel klalo. The presence is deterrence. Sige na, so I'll bring up.
Kadim quickly respond de Lebora Basilius.
So, Chair, you know, the CBM working group did not just got put together so we can sit down and have lunch once a month. We discussed issues. We looked at the operational arrangements, and we came up. We discussed strategies. We looked at health. We looked at labor. We looked at customs, immigration, post office, all our areas. We discussed the risk assessments, and we said hey, we should, and that's why one of the things we discussed was the API and passenger information. We talked about profiles, immigration, biosecurity, FIU, related matters, police. We invited people from other agencies to come and tell us. We had somebody from the Fusion Center. We had FBI. We had everybody come, the experts come in and tell us, well, this is what we're seeing. We've coordinated trainings. We've identified threats that are coming in, and events, interdictions, gaps, and requirements. This 35-page report talks about that. It talks about how we can share border management, responsibilities and cross-training, how we can deal with security, law, health, border security, and labor. There are 3 priorities that came about from this report. And I hope if the President accepts it, you guys will get it, because then you'll look at the policies that need to be addressed, the processes, the people, information, technology, infrastructure, the facilities we have, and governance. And the 3 strategies that we came up, it's not just focused on drugs. We're looking at the bigger issues. We wanted to make sure that, 1, we have mechanisms in place to coordinate and articulate border management governance processes, mechanisms. So, and then it talks about the CBM and what we need to do. We talked about people, the processes, and ICT infrastructure. And we also talked about endorsing a 5-year strategy plan. This is what we've been working on. It's not something that you can just say, hey, CBM, resolve the drug problem. It'll never go away as long as there's a demand. We all know that. The second strategy was to enable risk management and facilitation measures at the border. We came in, our objective is to enable efficiency and cross-agency collaboration, effective risk management and coordination, and deploy our resources and capabilities. It talks about that. And it talks about how we're going to do that and those areas that need addressing. So that's the second thing. The third strategic area talks about alignment with national and international obligations. It talks about how we'll align our border arrangements with national and international standards and objectives. So it's not it's not something that we can do, but this 5-year strategy plan is something that we can review and say, okay, we need laws, because it also talked about putting in a coordinated border legislation that involved all agencies. You take what does not need to be duplicated and put them together. So this is the assessment. I mean, we did the assessment. We went back and forth to discuss that. And this is the strategy here. Whether it's acceptable or not, we have it ready. We're just doing the final. We met a few weeks ago, and we are considerate of the timeline and the date. So we haven't neglected our roles, because you know how hard it is to get all these agencies in one place. And I have to thank the Ministry of Health, because if it wasn't for them and funding to organize the lunches, you know, sometimes we go for 2 hours. We asked Senator after our last meeting, Whips, to come and join us so he can address some issues. One of the things we addressed was the media. How do we address what we're doing with the media? So now we've got something arranged with the media as well, and labor, migration, and those issues. Labor's taking the lead. So, you know, we may be, this may be a working group with all the directors, but, you know, a lot of planning, a lot of preparation and strategies need to, and this report here is what you need to read. And then you can say whether or not we've done a good job or not. And I know nothing will ever be satisfying, but, you know, we'll have to say what we accomplished over the past year or two, and then we'll see from there. But a lot of things that have happened, I mean, we've been able to at least make small dents. We've been able to look at our operational arrangements. Labor, both of us, we said, hey, you know, these are the problems. Let's do an SOP so that we can, while we can speed up the process, and we can still make sure that we do the background and security checks and these things on people. And it's not easy. I mean, a lot of times, you know, it takes, you know, we need to be motivated. We need to be inspired to come in and work this. So I think that's the only thing I wanted to say. But thank you for your comments. I think it's important that we take that back and address those concerns if we haven't done so together. But the post office is a very good example of how we work very closely together to ensure that if we don't have the laws in place, at least we can have these administrative or operational arrangements in place. And that's what many of us deal with every day. Thank you.
Sulage Director Basilius, ngania comment na ka question. Also kung skate alman mo gara question ka ora padong simmer. Ya Presidenta Molas tal mega comment.
Dia algong dia sulang chairman algong mote aku loko hindi katogor ha amla tutka kam ere haleklutuk musese hindi me ako te postmaster ma director ng actually ako rin sa alto tu orang asuli ura malulungil lurior kami wa alabang ri at the same time kadamo tangal issue ra to ko ta drugs el dia al bayot to ko especially at ko ra border makadoreng sa alto tu ngora wayal plan makatmok la ko hil mate makopla kar min mutmok ngi ding wayal ngora telkebul usu ile community ko siga omola pal mutmok tel ko hil mawil ko hi mung say giti ako raktelin di important ringa kum daswing ya kuma say gal ripple papier mlamay bato ka executive order samlam katmok kalkiral tel to koy ding waya ko radir ko mulsi ringi mga kaomta sa luwaset tiya kalel bayungil lumakatmok la leadership rabulur belaul mak ebo to albang ringi for once and for all Malso ko mungudaw ko nga palta bataw daw. Malso ko mung komospe adal mga tmok lal bol ngarngi. Hindi akal sa pedal al ditong okar tilang lenga kamler el alsil semle expect wasay. Kalal ko nga report tal sa pedal ko mas kita. At talba ka sa maruel mula sa at least ang nga plato makasringin. Ang mga tmok anting ko ra tiyak ko ra tirak ng same. Aku lingit talwase mo takang ya mga tmok ringi terkagit terkarubak mat chairman ng kamaman. Lorenz. I hope hindi ka takora timo bla takak mo kita maara endra tial government hindi onti ka wase at least ko klangar al sala ministry sa gumiw ma government alam mo ko to nga balur pelal mo tong okro ko ito so ditya say kiti ako lingit ringi sulang.
Tsera waral bo, sekal mo di sa sale. Kung dira man saula, adra senet loms kang mamate al magime msaw da igal lurior. Igal lurior baitirgal adra lurior. Nga kabay di kal seba karungur kami ar meredla. La kami ar meredla la asaba mi ul meredla الموتيبيرا أموروري دي ناقا إلال كتنجك المو أورور administration أكمو مسا سيكا بتوغل مال غورا أرئيرت الكاغروس متى تملاموس ماو الوقتي آدم بدنير تيجي السي بي إم أسبيغل لو مرارنيل تقول واسين بايدوغي تيجي السي بي إم أجيمو سبق مامل قط موكلا أورور اللي أجيبه مرولة ما أجيبه قبيل مرولة ما الموتل بالدقليل على لأن الأدي أجيل لا الغارية عملا مصب هذا لو سبي إندي كمام الأذرة أورور أدري أجيبه مساول الشيل تغور عن بعض واسي نتورك من كذا غورا وضع ذا سيك ذا إيسوي سرا أورور لا المقتموك لا تأكيد الأورور سي بي إم سيجد الاستراتيجيك بلان اللي جيبلام رلي التانغ الأقوى ميودر رميون دي تأكيد القتل الراجل دي هذا سوار عادل كمام الشيء تيال قبل منتل سمالو رول ماك تأكيد يأكلو ريريل ما يجيد جيبلام identify تأكيد الاستراتيجيك بلان اللي جيبه مولدار سينما بريسيدنت يجيد أقوى تيمو سنيل نقوم مودي جيل مغسال تقرأ لا kami adra olbil amo omdas hindi nga amal direkal mereka suliu luaseng kami direkal malol ngser kama maktirekal olngitra kami igel guk meral mel meeting kama mar adra CBM malakal dil senator ngire abang lamay agi direkal open asimle direktor bolsil direkal el mem kom mesanga arangalel sel الدول دغر تلقى الغاغروس الغاغروس المدال أوريور على شيء قبل منترا قبل ربلا المغتمقرة دي إيمول مقتك مقتيم المرسيجي ده أكمل ديرك مال مرينا سولي ولا سبورت رمي
Chairman, may step out mga ilang ako bawlalo. Mela ako bawlalo mal di wana agriking uri siya President ra Senate ani asal mokmong Pasilius ka na momrek. Onda aktual diesel one algrika kadangara postal service ma any question nga similar morsel algrika mora director targong ela kada understand was the final screening for mail is done at the post office ela kada understand was the holder in airport a question nga cell integrity ma security cell holding Masel kamang rara airport dan bay muradit sing direct route ngani atte elel tu akl ngani atte elel asmere lamlal open ekmere da one rabax I got the guldars ma I hope postmaster in sem ko ra ngo suka kartil ay gid ako siga ge rogun teto akmuru nga kaldang rengra mak sulang postmaster mem hensi nga kara sel moruri
sulang senator Ilagil dulu asing gaps. Agil dulu asing alita tulauror. En wagel tilura alel lu ase upumong segid el Postal Processing Center el ngarsel compact agreement, self service agreement ra 1994 en la tilaigid el issue tilaigid atargel utur batakar rauror segid el melmutre lang. Ndi ang lao erisera era a compact ra 1994 mendiregal tolngak tramera airport el mera a post office nga kaya gultal akar tirgal adagal lowrol akmalo marartir indi ukputang ariar adal me auditra system rigid etmo identify segid el waset tiagid aklol gap le ukmu ko maralol tirak la ulawror ay gel mlara post office sel tobdar airport el mera igagid le post officer orior ingirira airport police el escort aigal caravan a post office el mera post office el mexilo así sel tobdar airport endial el metetu akla ndi mel malta ngar airport el mera post office se agired el
متأكد أغريق المرغب إنغرا مدير أغر مغتمق تلان إشورا airport police إن إشورا customs إن إشورا bureau of public safety. Who is responsible and how do we make them responsible to do it?
I see. Ela seguida el kadam el goni la sega tol agency akmar mengs ali india al nga kam saudra airport lenguk mlai mitra aklar mengs sa sing songs airport police mangaria rol gerel sei la dire ultuira au resource mang seguk ngaria adal gerel mo o aisir kamilu asi ngaram dirga kalbol ngaria airport police.
Okay, sulang kila amangar alam. Basilius, te elembre lang al su mandia ka presidenta kanya tingin.
Kamla maungila kam sulang.
Oh. Oh. Abo
Chair? Oh, sorry. That process is going to change. Why? Because about a year ago, 2 years, I wanted to build, not me, but we said, hey, we need to do what the U.S. is doing with the Mexican border, build a non-intrusive inspection facility. That, we wanted a big one, but we got a small one because, out of the concerns from the airport, they didn't want us obstructing. But we have, right next to the United Airlines, the non-intrusive inspection facility, we have a place over there where we will put one extra machine. The canine dogs will work there. When the mail comes, so if they're done with it this month, we can start doing it. All the mail, all cargo coming in will come into the non-intrusive inspection facility. Before it comes in, United will tag the mail with the barcode. They'll do that. Then we start doing doing that. We're not going to get the extra machines until later in 2025. But we do have one extra machine that is working at cargo. We're going to put that in temporarily. We're going to run the dogs, but all the mail coming in will be screened. And then we'll release that to United. United will then, for all general cargo, the post office will receive the mail. And this is the thing we got to think about also, because the non-intrusive inspection facility, we may not open a package. We'll just be running the dogs, extra machines, but if we pick up something, that's great. Now, is it necessary to also conduct another inspection where you open the packages up at the post office? Because in the back, we're going to put another X-ray machine there, and then what we need to do is find money to enclose it, put an air condition and a 220 outlet. But we came with CIP, and it's going to cost some money, but that's what we need to do now. We need to understand the flow because it's going to go inside. And then after that, they're going to release it. Customs going to open it for the third time, maybe second time. So it's not a very clean process. Maybe it's, the AG has said in her legal opinion that when Customs receives the mail, it's in our possession. We can search any mail without a warrant. It's in our custody. When we release it to them, It goes to the post office. Then it comes back out. Why? Because that's when the duty is paid. And that's when we also will find maybe something that we missed. So those, it's like you're filtering, you got this process in place. So you got to ask, is that sound right? Because in the U.S., it's just international cargo comes in, customs checks it, and then it's post office.
I
That's
got it. So, you're saying you need to modify the facility at the airport. Have you gotten approval from PIAC to do that? Because you don't own the airport.
No, it's already done. They've already
Do
done
you
the-
need money to finish it?
No, right now it's already done. We had
Okay.
leftover money.
So the problem is being solved. You have the approvals, you have the money to finish it.
Right.
Correct?
It's going to happen, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We're going to even have CCTV cameras in there.
Fantastic. Okay. President.
Sulang chair malungil maya uewak director ka ma postmaster general matirgal admi mo mal sulang raklo renge klo tutlel lendial ngarang kami amadeng waseng al dangartial ada dueng kada albang rambal klo taygid el togora gar el murtra chela blur belau ya kami amadeng waseng togarang el ged el mlamosmer ya report el dangar hospital waseng garau maul kadang artiang osiga rawasem kadam garaeng kaing seul rulit algar mang mo dial leklora al selablur belau makut telgri direktora wasing sebem lo ai selwasing tial garang mesois bel logiwa angranga ulang mal leklol ngarbelau.
Right now, they're all coming in from the U.S. And that's the same thing we're seeing with in other countries coming from the U.S. Our nationals living in San Francisco, Oregon, and those places. So that's how it's coming in. And before, it wasn't happening. Guam as well. Remember I told you the last time somebody brought it in. It was in a Big Mac, you know. So and then so those are the things we need to be aware of, because right now, before it was Philippines, and now you see the Chinese. We've always known that these kind of trends are going to happen for Palau. So are we ready to deal with that, with those things? Now fentanyl is a really big problem in the U.S. I don't know what's happening right now, but Guam is trying to figure out what happened. They got 4 college or 4 people who you know. So it's not a situation that our agency can handle. No, it's a holistic. I mean, we need to figure out what's happening, because, you know, we hear the same things. Oh, you know, all these young kids are doing vapes. You know, you know.
To be specific, are they coming through the passenger or through cargo or through the ship?
Right now,
who are getting it? That's a question. And do you know if you can tell us where it's coming from?
At the post, it's from the U.S.
From U.S.
U.S.
Okay.
And then at the airport, I don't know where. Well, we do know that the Guam flight now is a flight to really look at. We've been focused on Cambodia, but then China Airlines, the other passenger that came in, those kind of issues. So, you know, what we need to do is focus on the intel. Public safety right now, customs, all of us, we need to exchange intel. We can't just keep it and you know, so that's the problem we have here. The DA and the ICE, Immigration and Customs, they're both tasked in the U.S. to have intel and to investigate. DA is going outside of the U.S. to even infiltrate and coming back, but they weren't sharing, so they made a directive to focus and share intel. And then because right now, you know, the problem is right now we're seeing things coming from the U.S. Our kids are going abroad, coming back, or you know, or people are victims because somebody says, "Hey, can you take this through?" Legitimate businesses are being used. Same with the post office. So you know, there's always somebody who's being influenced, and it's sad. If you look at you need to look at some of the cases, because I only look at a few from the past, way past, but when you hear stories about how some kid went to the States to go to school, and then somebody one of his buddies hooked him up on meth, and how it changed his life, and then he said, "Hey, let me," you know, and then he ended up back in Palau. He ended up trying to bring it in. It's sad, but that's the reality. So I think to understand, you know, it's not just, and I heard you guys discuss these problems. It's not just not an enforcement issue. It's a health issue. It's a holistic problem. But
the reason why I'm asking that question, you know, Postmaster General a post office, a border security, away al ars. That's say all the swilar adra blur velo. Ling I get the blol nga a border security de rulyang lel, a post office de rulyang lel der adom das lo say I get the blor railing so is what telka. Mang kamama oger gamiu mo musugumam, el musugumio mang sebe edel lulit tel modiagan lo igel lo senator quartelin. Al bebi ratay me kadam sanglo sigrar ngiang ngargit. Aga dire kalau meral wacin gire la government amo gire moria leadership ada do dire kada checker gidar adra government rogui from top to the bottom kada agote the cleaner gid em cleaner ding kidang artialeng dan ngrang it's a big issue. Tiasel Gomes basen kuk pai chlor issue rap PGST. El agdabay di sello ro mesan news mangara gardi mesadra a PGST edi ka adal madra PGST. Tiagi del gara bai to gar adal la madra ngi tiabay gire del el cancer ngi chairman el bai gire el mangkadam gara kay ngse el kadam del wasen di kat el modiak. Di at least itong meriol kuk sebel clear adaling it's a big issue segida gira de lo gerengir kemilo sen magamagara kadamagara ko mosugma mosugbi ekada at least itong meriol lagda face rawai tangling wahile kada adur tang ngari ngar adal malaring al time ndak sebel lo martling ela sel doral mliwek abela rogir babel daw yol daw in concern ling tara o tio sen kloa drax ar or len kamame abasel ngarap PC le meeting regmamra 2 weeks ago len ertel ngarap PC la modibu satang kan modibu salu mendim le kamamal kakarger adalong alam legi wase kita kelel ngaring irgi damru rutiange edo sigra adal waset mer mung sea mung akpel ngiter kemiu wase mungsuguma mungsugumi the trial listener tel draxera amre the time ila dongil bodo adadura ura it's too late ige kita tinga de gor me ngamal mrenga sulira effort kita muy one news eu mesa urelu you're doing komring lowrior di samhay ngaringa ding mo se kan sunra ara drablu
Already sat alela inabamal eska questioner ngi then the wrap up
Komeng director ang kanang director kora wase mang ngani akora mo parte tegi del strategy review del bom delivering ma presidente el September el result del executive order number 475 el baseng el mo involve school rablur bela rogir college sa mga high school sa rogoy ma elementary lel su mangarga da amo madu el make a decision el basit temak nitrangak and maybe sa idang mo dia da mo dia kloa otru lel tal klal ngalga da mo bingal base nga hade kalgiri kal mo malartiang mang akumda si segi da de al mal cloud to telel mang akura di oger segi del wase I hope yang moring ya partner tiang al mo ra school system ra blur bela mang masab edel educate ang al giray gal drugs ma akti segi da kari ge kamsulang
our strategy is to get together with the Ministry of Justice. We have our K9 and the guys from Drug Enforcement that have gone out to the schools. So we're trying to do that again. But yes, it's important for us to focus on the education of drugs and that. I know I did discuss with the AG about one time because we had a case where they tried to say, hey, isn't there a law that says you have to put a sign telling people it's illegal to bring drugs in? But if that was under Executive Order 190, then it's no longer there. But those are the things we need to revisit. I mean, we need to work with the schools and our people to even go on the radio. We're scheduling a radio talk show. When is that? In September. Yeah, with the CBM, so we can talk with them. So that's something else that we, Senator Whips recommended that we do, be more visual. But yeah, we need to focus on education because that's the key.
So I just came from Washington and Oregon, and we went to the place where there are homeless people because there are drugs. So our children needs to know those kind of situations because they're making decisions for their lives. We looked at that and I got really scared that we can end up with something like that here too. So maybe it's more important to focus on making sure our children can make the right decision. So lang Director.
So inabo kumda sa tila ay gidal na question na kumda sa ngil reserve ngil morsel next group mail sa gida ko kadamo discuss sel blal sisbra sel abalu masel ay gelguk impact ngil mora distribution material uspe ma armo victims sa tay gidal drug abuse sa kumda sa ngil gukpol next sa mo next step tirigal invite kami malsung mo niya temi sa gidal next group mail include ra Ministry of Justice ma AG public health ay gigida mutmakal guk meranik sel group ay kaduguk momes sa gigida guk impact sa blal lungoy ra border mera al sila society may gigida guk impact al mar society ay gigida le health ra adablu ay gigida direct mo o so adal gigida sa gigida guk part of oversight me klutel mal mera sulim na mo da kateme de kadamla Amira namu 4 o'clock ngania follow up hindi ka follow up ng one meeting na senators 4 o'clock amang dik bok sa telela vice chair committee madi bolong tergi de long simre di tegi di bok tulil mo ora so ka bol bora attention ergid tial as a chairman na committee ako Mr. Tial issue drugs one mal it's a very critical national security risk al gumrak na singir el leadership from the top el merio mo Mr. Tiang kada trial address ngi el bodo sa tora funding mga nangklel gumrak na si Tiang is sa edel ngul justify aus pa lelay kaludo dra impact el bladang Tiang address ra national security ma health issue ablur belaw I don't think it's gonna take a difficult justification or justify mora president ma a leadership masim the allocate our resources will take care of the problem ling ala da take care nging it's gonna affect health rangalged ma blue ma sa sila society rigid ma business community hindi mo affected ar kulto koy sige da diktali mga suliw de sa telela vice chairman di bolom tergi de lo close meeting
so tele chairman en so kalawra nga sulel director material guk milgalim bergil may ma postmaster material guk milgalim bergil may postmaster general material guk milgalim bergil may kamya narmeng sa frustration or our senators will issue. Unfortunately, you felt the brunt of that frustration. And why? The issues are real. We feel it, we hear it, we see it. Maselba always a Senate needs to take action. And the way the Senate takes action, to find out was ngara ngal sangasu. We know was etial issue border protection is complicated. Ngaria la allow gid magdamru relet ediri ngaria la al protect their individuals maguk tegal se dal kuk mot mur al silsay. May gigid al issue diregal mo pose threats to successful prosecution. Appreciate the fact that we addressed methamphetamines and also raised awareness to fentanyl, which is now an emerging threat to our society. We can protect our borders, we can prosecute, but without proper education and awareness to stop the demand, then the complete terror. Sales Senate, sales is give you support. How do we give you support? Tell us what you need in terms of laws so we can make sure those gaps are no longer there. I appreciate the cell effort with the Coordinated Border Management Working Group. I sat in with you, last month, just as a guest to listen into discussions and understand the issues that come up, challenges. Gumral was even though this executive order may stop next month, I think the Coordinated Border Management Working Group is a valuable tool that needs to continue onward. Anyway, I leave that with you and your ministers and the President to decide. We are here to try to address the issues that we know are facing our community. Tell us what you need in terms of laws, and tell us what you need in terms of funding. That's why I specifically ask you, Director, that sorting facility, do you need money? Do you need approval? Because that's one thing you said you're working on. Anything else, especially the Senate, to address an immediate need, let's not wait for a donor. Let's not wait for someone else to help us. We can help ourselves. With that said, and there's another group coming, as the chairman mentioned. That's really after the border what happens. And that's going to translate into prosecution, and most importantly, education and raise awareness to our community so we can do something about the demand, reduce the demand for these drugs. After that, we've had a heated, productive discussion, and I appreciate everyone's time and effort in trying to address this issue together.